Warning, in today's episode there are spoilers for the Loki show. They occur at about 40 minutes into the episode.
It's a one-liner.
Welcome to the Bayesian Conspiracy. I'm Inyash Brodsky.
I'm Steven Zuer.
I'm Jay Sticky.
And today we are having another episode where we just talk about cool stuff that we like. But first we are going to talk about cool less wrong sequences because we like all of them.
But first,
Uh-oh.
I insist, talking about cool stuff we like. I'll be fast. I played the remaster of Skyward Sword, which, if you're a Zelda aficionado, takes place at the beginning of the Zelda timeline. And then partway through the series, there's like 3 distinct branches of timelines depending on how things shook out. And Breath of the Wild canonically takes place at the end of all of them. It doesn't matter what lineage you went down throughout the timelines. And it was so much fun. The gameplay was great. The story was awesome.
Played the unremastered Skyward Sword?
No, I didn't.
A lot of people hated that one, and I have problems with that because I fucking loved it.
I didn't have like the extra Wii add-ons thing to make the sword work.
You're making a jack-off motion while you do that. I just want all the audience to know.
No, that is, I think, the problem that a lot of people have with that, because you did, in fact, have to swing around your Wiimote like a sword. But they also made you do dumb things like having to like raise it to the sky and basically wiggle it in a jacking off motion in order to like throw enemies off. So like, yeah, okay, it had its problems. Okay.
But what's cool is that the Switch version, that's all optional. You can play it that way, or you can play it with buttons. But the cool thing is, like, you do have to do diagonal strikes, and if you do it with the Switch with the remote, you're doing it with like just swinging the little stick diagonally. But if you're doing it with the motion controls, you do have to move your arm in the right way. That's kind of fun. But it would be
especially
exhausting
when
to
you
play.
hit your partner in the head accidentally trying to kill something.
It would be exhausting to play like that all the time. But I brought all that up because we're talking about Breath of the Wild, and there is a location in Breath of the Wild that I'm convinced is a primary important location from Skyward Sword that we'll have to talk about nerdily off the air, but it's super cool. Anyway, great stuff if you're into
Why'd
Zelda
you bring
lore.
it up on the air if you're going to talk about it off the air?
Because the game is worth playing if anyone was on the fence.
Oh, okay.
If you heard mixed reviews about Skyward Sword when it came out originally, the remaster was awesome and super fun, worth playing.
Okay, fantastic.
And the other quick one,
Yeah.
I saw The Suicide Squad yesterday.
I've heard that one was actually surprisingly good.
It was so awesome.
Okay.
Was it?
So
Sell me on it.
James Gunn did Guardians of the Galaxy.
Oh, James Gunn did this one? Oh, it's probably going to be good.
Yeah, I'm already kind of sold.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, James Gunn's like, hey, this group of random, like, kind of makeshift throwaway heroes that nobody knew existed?
These trash babies.
Yeah, want to watch me
here.
make these characters fun? Want to watch me do it again? And it was, I think, 2 main selling points. 1, James Gunn. 2, it was R-rated. And so, like, they didn't have to pull their punches.
Was the first Suicide Squad not R-rated?
I think it was PG-13.
Oh my god. Okay.
And if it wasn't, it felt like it
I
was.
saw the first Suicide Squad, and I don't remember it
That was
very
Rachel, too.
well, which is probably telling.
We watched the pitch meeting after.
So I love Harley Quinn, and I've loved Harley Quinn since the original Batman animated series. And like the recent movies have made me love her more. The recent anime series have made me love her even
Okay,
more.
that's the correct opinion.
How
Go
much? Thank you. Okay, how much Harley Quinn is there in this movie?
Enough.
It doesn't sound like enough.
It's not a Harley Quinn centric movie.
Damn it.
But she's a main. I'm not sure who the main character is. Probably I don't want to. I can't remember the character's name. There's one character who gets more screen time probably, but it's a menagerie of characters.
Okay.
It's not Birds of Prey where it's like the Harley Quinn movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean she's one of the Suicide Squad.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess who is the Wolverine of this movie? Since every ensemble movie seems to, ever since X-Men, have had just, a Wolverine who's the actual main character.
Then it's
Whether
probably
the fans
Harley
want
Quinn.
them to be or
Oh,
not.
really?
I mean, yeah.
Okay.
Especially because everyone else is in it. I mean, there's a couple who are in other movies, but that's it. So, like, I don't know. Either that or, I forget his name, Idris Elba's character.
Oh, yeah. I could see he could definitely pull off the world, too.
Yeah.
What was his character?
I can't remember what his name was. It wasn't Deadshot, because that was Will Smith's character. But he has basically the same power.
Okay.
He's good at bullets. So, anyway, it was hilarious. It leaned into the absurdity of, like, how dumb is this premise, right? And it's like, okay, well, watch me turn this up to 11 and just roll with that. And it was a really good time. Strong recommend.
Let me know, is there a Jared Leto in it?
No.
Okay. That's good, because that would have been a hard pass for me.
Yeah. No.
think that was the problem people had with the other Suicide Squad, right?
I mean, that was one of them. They had many
One of
problems.
them,
Yeah.
I strongly recommend the pitch meeting for the first Suicide Squad movie. Whether you've seen it or not, a good refresher on it was perfect.
There was a great movie about the art of editing and how the Suicide Squad failed in every single aspect. I got it. I'll see if I can look it up and link it in the show notes because it was really good. Like he pointed out, here's how you do editing correctly. Here's what they did in Suicide Squad. Why? Why, God, why?
Yeah, I mean, it was directed by James Gunn, executive directed or executive produced by Zack Snyder. Like, it had the right people behind this movie. So
Cool.
just buckle up, enjoy a ridiculous 2 hours. It was a lot of fun.
All right.
Okay, that was my fun tangents. So
Steven, getting that DC money.
that's right.
I hope you share it with the rest of us.
Yeah, Batman's wallet isn't as deep as you'd think. I didn't get paid nearly enough for that plug.
Damn it. Well, at least get us a couple empanadas. All right, the less wrong posts we have this week start out with The Wonder of Evolution. I think...
Can I please read the first couple of lines of this?
Absolutely.
The wonder of evolution is that it works at all. I mean that literally. If you want to marvel at evolution, that's what's marvel-worthy. How does optimization first arise in the universe? If an intelligent agent designed nature, who designed the intelligent agent? Where is the first design that has no designer? The puzzle is not how the first stage of Bootstrap can be super clever and super efficient. The puzzle is how it can happen at all. And then evolution resolves the infinite regression by not being super clever and super efficient, but by being stupid and inefficient and working anyway. This is the marvel. And yes, it is.
When I was taking notes out of this, I basically only took out the first line and the last line. And I was like, that's basically the entire post. Yeah.
Yeah. Or like as I put it before we started recording, evolution, we hate it. It's bad. But it's real. We're not saying it's not real. We just don't like it very much. Stop saying it's great.
Yeah. It's like watching a janky-ass, hammered together duct tape hit car. You're like, how the fuck does this work? It's amazing that it works.
Yeah,
But it's not good.
Yeah, I mean, it's remarkably good for how, like, it's doing everything brainlessly, but it's for me, the whole post was just fun because it kind of, like, carbon dates the era in which it was written.
That's what I pulled out, too.
Oh, nice. Did you?
I think
And
so.
then the whole,
Evolution does not explain the origin of life comment?
Oh, no, I just meant, I mean, yes, I made the carbon date joke as an evolution reference, but this was written, 2007, 2008?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so kind of right when all this fun conversation was happening. I don't know if people are still debating evolution and creation online.
No, the atheism wars seem to have gone away. I don't know. Maybe there are somewhere and we're just not in that
I
scene
think
anymore.
they are, but they've taken, like, the back seat to
The culture
all
wars are
the
the
other
big
culture
thing.
war stuff.
Yeah.
But, like,
God, I'm glad I grew up during the atheism wars. That sounded like a lot more fun.
Oh my god, it was so much fun. I loved it.
it was pretty fun.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's, like, why I always had an issue with, like, wanting to put an evolution fish, for example, on my car. Like, they have, the Jesus fish, and then the evolution fish just says evolution and has feet on it, and I always thought that, like, oh, that's funny, but also I don't want to say that I'm, like, in support of evolution, because I don't, if I were in charge, I'd totally get rid of this terrible system. I'm not trying to say that, like, no, God is stupid. Evolution is what's great. Evolution sucks.
It's almost more shallow and vapid than, like, just putting, like, a Biden sticker on your car. Because at least that is like, yeah, I can get behind this guy because I have to, but, if you're putting a
vote
Darwin
Biden.
fish on your car, all you're saying is, like, I'm pro-science. And it's like, that's great, but come on.
I personally like the sticker because it was, saying, hey, I'm on the atheism side in the atheism wars. And I never did that, but I did get the scarlet letter A patch that I put on my backpack, which was, my way of signaling what side I'm on.
I've actually never put a bumper sticker of any kind on my car because I'm worried about somebody, like, just damaging my car out of hate. I've seen this happen so many times.
That's my thing. I haven't had bumper stickers on in 10 years, and I like it. And it also, the car looks cleaner, but...
The main reason I haven't had bumper stickers on is because I've been told many, many, many times that I drive like an asshole, and I don't want people to see a bumper sticker for something I like and then be like, oh, assholes support that thing. I like that thing less now.
Or then to be able to spot your particular car at a parking lot versus, like, another, similar make and model.
Well, I mean, I don't think anyone's going to be, like, memorizing my car and chasing me down. I don't, like, intentionally cut people off or anything. I'm just, like, slightly more aggressive on the road than the idiots who... Never mind. I have opinions on how people should drive, and that it is too slow and stupid usually.
I have the opinion
heavy-footed.
that nobody should
Yes.
drive, and we should just have robot cars already. Please.
I mean, yesterday we were driving to the Renaissance Festival, and the dude driving was just staying in this slow lane. I'm like, The right lane, it's right there. It's been going faster than us for 2 miles. Why are you not in the right lane?
You could zen out and watch the episode of Mythbusters where they do traffic myths, and they do like a 4-hour stretch of highway down California, and it's not, they only have like 4 drivers. They can't do it over and over. But the time difference between picking a lane and sticking with it and swerving lanes was negligible.
Yeah.
I know.
Negligible,
but
not negligent.
It feels better. Maybe,
exactly.
But,
that's the thing.
But then I just I find the right speed. I'm usually a little over the speed limit. I'm in the fast lane, but then you just chill out and enjoy the ride.
No, I'm
I
not
go
a chill
about 5
dude.
over generally, and I just stick it on cruise control.
Yeah.
I'm a chill dude in many respects. I'm not a chill dude when I'm trying to get somewhere because I feel every minute in a car is just a waste of my life waiting to get where I actually want to be.
Put on podcasts.
Yeah, or
Yeah,
do some mindfulness
yes.
meditation maybe.
No.
No?
I don't know. I wouldn't want to zen out in the middle of a traffic thing and then kill someone.
Well, you're not going to kill someone.
yeah,
You're probably going to kill someone more by driving aggressively than not, but I realize
I'm
we're
going to
really
kill
off topic.
I'm going to kill multiple minutes of my life sitting in a car when I could be going a little faster. But you're right, we are off topic.
No, it's fine. I listen to podcasts, or there's random things turning in my head that are on the back burner. Like, all right, yeah, let's filter some of these out. What have you been working on back of my brain? And
I learned to drive before podcasts were a thing, so I guess I have
So did
old
I.
habits ingrained. Okay, well, you learn faster than I do, apparently.
I had years of jobs where I drove for a living, and I realized that the difference between
Right.
just gunning it and trying to make every light and going around every slow person and then just taking it easy
That
was
just
like
stresses you out so much more when you're
yeah.
caring about all that shit.
And when I was delivering pizzas through college, it was like 90 seconds of difference, and I'm like, oh, I can just be super chill, and I get there in about the exact same amount of time. This is perfect.
You had to come to peace with it.
Yeah.
I also have my 2 dead friends from car accidents,
Yeah.
and my time doing volunteer EMS and just scraping people off the side of the road, where I was just look, trying to get there 90 seconds faster results in this.
Yeah, all right.
Good God. Yeah, that's intense. I
Is
couldn't
this
handle
really
it.
worth your own and other people's life or the damage of property? It's not.
This
Calm
is
the
why
hell down.
I want my next car to be a fully self-driving car.
We're gonna look back
Me too.
bizarrely at the time where they used to let monkeys drive cars.
Yeah, the
For
hell
real.
were they thinking?
Humans were not made to go 75 miles an hour. We can't
No.
even comprehend things at that speed. We didn't evolve for this.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of evolution,
That's why highways are optical illusions.
Nice segue. The
Oh, wait, I have a. Can I ruin that segue with a random?
Ruin
well,
it.
It's already too late. So.
but you need to do
optical
it.
illusions, go
you,
for it.
you need a second one that
I was going
segues
to say,
back.
with regarding to your voluntary EMS, I was going to say I couldn't handle the carnage. Speaking of carnage, the trailer for the second Venom movie actually looks really good.
Oh my God.
The second what movie?
Venom?
Oh, I still need to watch the first one.
I mean,
Apparently,
I
it
heard
was
the
actually
first
pretty
one
good
was
as
such
long
a
as.
pile of shit.
No, that's the thing. So, all right, real quick. I didn't want to go this long. I just wanted to say, let there be carnage. But so I anticipate the movie will be a train wreck because Venom was way better than it had any right to be.
What?
I don't know why it was good.
I heard
didn't.
it was bad.
I don't like what they did with Venom.
Okay.
But you just ignore that, and the movie was great.
Oh, so if you
like-
don't think of it as a Venom movie, just like as a random alien movie?
Think of it yeah, basically. So
Okay.
because to me, Venom has always been the anti-Spider-Man.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the thing people
So
had a
you-
problem
you
with.
take
They took
Spider-Man out of it
context.
entirely
Okay.
and give Venom kind of a fresh take, and then it was really interesting and funny and good.
Alright.
And so if lightning can strike twice, Venom or Let There Be Carnage will be great. All right, that's
So is
longer
this
than I
actually going to be Venom versus Carnage?
or Venom and Carnage? I'm not quite sure. Probably some verses.
I think they were always versus. Like there was never. That's not true. There was probably some storyline where they had to team up for something.
They're baddies.
Yeah, but they're like.
But they're not-
Venom is like possible anti-hero baddie, and like Carnage is just pure murder everything baddie.
Yeah, Carnage was the guy that the symbiote is possessing. There was a terrorist named Cletus Cassidy, and so he already was like, let's go kill people. Whereas Eddie Brock was just a reporter, who wanted
hated
to.
Peter Parker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like, what happens when you give a psychopathic terrorist super alien powers? Well, you're going to get Carnage.
Cool.
Okay, well,
So the one thing that is not entirely related to this post, because we already covered the post, evolution, it's crazy that it works. But the thing that Stephen mentioned on was that it harps on, it reiterates the point made in the Evolution Wars when creationists and atheists were fighting. It reiterates the thing that evolution does not explain the origin of life. First replicator does not come from a replicator. Evolution describes statistical trends in replication. Basically goes over the whole thing, that the evolution doesn't need to explain the origin of life. It's a separate process from abiogenesis. And it just seems completely out of place reading this at this point in time, because it's like, who cares what this have to do with anything? But like when you read it at the time, it was absolutely like both necessary and expected that something like that would be in a an article about the early origins of evolution. And like
it was nostalgic.
It was nostalgic. It also felt kind of weird that like that thing was such a big deal 20 years ago and now has basically disappeared. Like I wonder if the sequences were written nowadays, if instead of having some of this atheism stuff on it, if it would have culture war threads throughout it.
See, that's why I'm glad they happened when they did.
Yeah.
And I got off social media basically when the culture wars really kicked off in like 2015, 16. So
I think if they did, it would probably be a very light-handed touch because, you know, science doesn't have too terribly much to say about culture, at least not nearly in the same way as evolution and creationism.
I think they'd find room to fight. I mean, it all like culture wars did kind of shatter the skeptic and new atheism movements.
Yeah, but I mean, they shattered them specifically because you can't go and say like, you know, science shows this is how evolution works. You're an idiot creationist, you know? It's much more fuzzy, more social sciencey, which is, you know, squishy as it is.
I'd love to see a scientific take on the culture wars, but the thing is that, well, I think the whole problem with the culture wars is that it also coincided with cancel culture being a thing.
Right. If there was a scientific take, the science would get canceled.
But yeah, exactly. I mean, that I think is a lot of what's happening there.
Cancel science.
Like, I was catching up on some of the Mind Killer, and they were talking about like some transgender stuff, and then I was also just listening to. There's a Radiolab episode, the most recent one I think, that is just called Gonads.
Oh, I haven't listened to Radiolab in going on 2.5 years now because
they've been recycling some of their content. And...
Oh, that's good. Some of the older stuff.
Oh, that's good. I thought that was why you were going to say you hadn't listened to it.
No, because they did the same thing that pretty much every NPR show has done, except so far Planet Money. But even Planet Money has been starting to lean that way recently, and it's so bumming me out. The trend is just like everything is about anti-racism and whatever the current culture war stuff is. Yeah, but, it's like why is Radiolab, which is ostensibly a science show, entirely about culture war things? So yeah,
I think they have a good take on culture war stuff, or at least they're able to also tackle, here's what science has to say about this thing.
The Gonads episode was an older one, wasn't it?
It may have been a recycled one. Like,
I think I remember listening to that one, and it was still pretty good.
Yeah, I think it was because the Olympics is happening now, and then they were like, here's the thing about the Olympics that we did a bit ago that's like still relevant, and it was basically there's a woman from India who's really good at running, and they did a gender test on her, or like they didn't really tell her, but they're just like, okay, we're gonna do a blood test.
Yeah, I remember this.
And then suddenly it was like, you're disqualified because you're really a man. And she's like, what the fuck? I was born female, raised as a female. Like, I seem to have female, like, sex characteristic. Like, what are you talking about? Mm-hmm. And it was just hyper-androgenism, which is not even really a thing. Like, so I like that they do actually get into the science, and
yeah, that was an interesting.
It's just much more complicated. Like that, you know, as a transgender person, I get pissed off when there's so much sort of pushback from even like the people that ostensibly should be like quote unquote on my side, the left, but like people get real uncomfortable when you start talking about like actually there are biological bases for these things, or like we might not know all of them yet, but clearly there's like things that map to reality that like that causes and effects are happening, and maybe we could look at those to try to get a better understanding. They're just like, oh no.
Well, and you
can't look at the science.
You who has a vested interest in science understanding this properly will never ye fear people who will be offended on your behalf of anyone investigating any of these questions, lest
I don't
anything
want
come
them
out.
to do that.
I know, but that's the
that's the bad thing.
Yeah, it's the funny bad part of it.
So like, I wonder if evolution ends with, let us dispose of the idea that evolution is a wonderful designer or a wonderful conductor of species' destinies, which we human beings ought to imitate. Shudders. For human intelligence to try to imitate evolution as a designer would be like a sophisticated modern bacterium trying to imitate the first replicator as a biochemist. As T.H. Huxley, Darwin's bulldog, put it, quote, let us understand once and for all that the ethical progress of society depends not on imitating the cosmic process, still less in the running away from it, but in combating it.
Yarr.
Yarr.
We must kill God.
Huxley didn't say that because he disbelieved in evolution, but because he understood it all too well. And good. Yes. Yeah. Agreed.
I meant that arg in a agreeing sort of way, as if you're a pirate at the Renaissance. So.
You were just still channeling, the Renaissance.
So.
Yeah. It's been less than 12 hours for me. No, that's not true. Less than 24.
I haven't been to the Renaissance Fair yet. I gotta go this year.
It's really fun.
Yeah, I went last year. I had a great time.
Have you seen the Heroines in Disguise show?
No.
Oh, it's great.
Is it like trapeze artists doing stuff?
No, it's just three chicks being really raunchy, telling jokes, singing raunchy songs, that kind of shit.
Well, part of it's in the sky.
No, heroine's in disguise.
Oh, in disguise.
Yeah.
I thought it was in the sky.
Yeah, right. Very similar sound. Maybe I mumbled my words too.
Nah, I probably heard what I wanted to hear, and I was picturing like 3 Wonder Women fighting in like on tight
rocket
ropes or
boots.
yeah. Well, rocket boots would make it Renaissance fair, but I could imagine like ropes or pulleys.
They had rockets during the Renaissance. They just weren't very good.
What?
The first space flight, remember, it was some Chinese emperor who like tied a whole bunch of fireworks to his throne and then ascended to the heavens?
No.
Yes.
He ascended straight to heaven by dying.
No.
Well, he disappeared.
That
into the
sounds
sky.
awesome, and I'm gonna have to research this later because holy shit, that's great.
I remember hearing about this.
I really hope this isn't
Okay.
apocryphal, but like this is a thing I've heard of repeatedly and I've always just found delightful.
We'll have to try and find any conclusive thing on it, because I've definitely heard the similar story, but I don't know how much of it is just like what made it into legend, right?
Google filled in
Wan Hu.
Chinese Emperor rocket, and it filled in chair for me. So I was like, apparently it's a thing.
There we go.
But yeah, I'll read more about it later. That's fantastic.
I mean, if anybody says there was some historical figure that did this insane dumb thing, like my priors are probably.
Yeah, people were stupid. Checks out. All right.
See, I would have put one of my peasants, or paid one of my
Do you really want
a lord.
a peasant to go to heaven before you?
How about one of the lords I didn't like?
There we go.
Again, the expectation was he was going to get to meet the gods, as opposed to.
I'd let him take the first ship, and then if it works, then I'd like, all right, well,
But
obviously,
what if he pucks up God before you get there, and like he's the real emperor when you get there, and you're like,
oh,
fuck.
yeah. I forgot they believed they might actually like get to God. I thought they were just trying to make cool stories like for their own mythos going forward. Yeah,
Well,
if they actually
that's a cool story for his mythos.
yeah. But I figure
Hope
if
it was
it
worth it
worked,
for him.
then you just write him out of history because you're the emperor, and then you say you did it. Yeah.
I mean, would anybody remember Wan Hu if he hadn't done this?
Probably like
Not
people
very
that
well.
learn Chinese history. Maybe Chinese people if they are taught their history in school. I don't know.
I believe they are taught their history in school, but also it's very long, and there's the romance of the Three Kingdoms, and it's just
And it may be edited by the Communist Party for whatever makes them, look
That
best.
too.
So that's why I say if they're taught that.
Speaking of stupid ideas, like going to space in a chair.
what else is
attached to
stupid,
fireworks.
Steven?
Evolutions.
Nice. Evolutions are stupid, but work anyway is the next blog post. Steven, you started it. You want to kick us off?
Yeah, he opens by saying he pluralizes evolutions because there are, I'm paraphrasing him, but there are as many evolutions as there are species.
Yes.
That,
Like there's us, and there's octopi,
right.
and
There's
there's tardigrades. What the hell are tardigrades?
predators, prey, there's, host versus infections and that sort of thing. So
Did you guys see the latest thing about tardigrades is that they can survive being shot? When I read this, I thought that they somehow managed to get these microscopic animals on a target and shoot them. But what they actually did was they made them the bullet and then they shot them out of the gun, and they survived. So like
It doesn't surprise me.
sometimes evolution does a really great job.
yeah, but these things aren't doing anything cool. I mean, they're doing all kinds of cool
They're
shit.
not
that
doing
we-
anything cool. They
we
survive
can
in the vacuum of
appreciate.
space, in acid, in like
Yeah, call me
boiling
when they
water.
build a computer and go to the moon.
Surviving is okay, I guess.
Surviving's tight. Don't get me wrong.
Like
but
just coming from the perspective of a very squishy human, we're terrible at surviving.
Yeah, but
Oh,
if you have to give up your brain to survive, I don't think that'd be worth it.
I think they have little proto brain things going on.
Yeah, they don't have a human brain. I'd have to give up my brain for a little proto brain, and that's not worth it. You might as well just kill me.
well, maybe we can work our way to tardigrade humanoid hybrids at some point, which just sounds horrible. But
It does.
Maybe to you.
luckily, evolution won't do it for us because evolutions are slow.
Yes.
I like how there was other phrase I meant to grab here about cross purposes of evolutions and stuff.
Fox evolutions work at cross purposes to rabbit evolutions.
Yeah, but then neither can talk to snake evolution to learn about how to build venomous fangs, because it would be great for either one of them, right? But that's just not how this works.
Yeah.
And because this isn't a long post,
On
so
the
I'll,
macro scale, anyway. Bacteria are really great at just, hey, you want a gene? I've got a gene.
Yeah, that's
Right.
true.
yeah, swapping around. What's fun is that most of like the way I learned evolution was from posts online. Like I don't think it was.
Yeah, right?
It wasn't like taboo in
I didn't-
school. I did have a good high school teacher that talked about it, but that was in like junior year of high school.
Yeah.
And so like I learned about the structure of the atom, way earlier on, and this is the structure of
Which
the
was
atom
wrong, by the
equivalent
way,
for
'cause
biology.
it was probably the ping pong ball.
It was the Bohr
like,
model, yeah, but I
yeah.
mean it was the workable model for an eighth grader,
Yeah,
right?
I guess like there are levels where there are different physics models or whatever models that sort of are simplified, not quite right, but get you moving in the right direction that I guess I don't unendorse.
I never learned the Einstein physics equations, but I learned the Newtonian ones, right? Because they're close enough for me getting around day to day.
Yeah. Not to beat a dead horse or anything, but this is yet another reason people don't need to go to high school and shouldn't be forced to, because the evolution you learn in high school doesn't stick, and if you're actually interested, you learn it at places other than high school.
I think it was fun because it felt like kind of like this thing was this big, mysterious, complicated secret, and then I bought a 300-something page book called The Greatest Show on Earth by Richard Dawkins.
Awesome.
And it's one of those things where it's like, oh, I can explain evolution succinctly and I think adequately in a paragraph, but you did it great in a book, and I loved it, and I recommend it. But I was like, I thought this was some big, complex, mysterious, controversial thing. No, couldn't be more straightforward.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah.
No, it's just, change over time.
Yeah.
And then, like, stuff being selected or anti-selected for, and then that being what happens.
Limited resources, imperfect replication, and, yeah.
Like, the minute I heard about the theory of evolution, and I was raised Roman Catholic, and God did it, and etc., and even, like, when I was taught evolution, I was taught it alongside,
Creationism?
The creationism disguised as science.
Intelligent design.
Yeah, intelligent design. They had to teach the controversy at my school. But the funny thing was the teacher, I could tell, was not into it. So sort of like she'd be talking about, here's the way that science thinks things work, and then I am mandated to tell you that some people think that God did it, and that's what happened, and I'm being forced to tell you this, and that is the thing that people think, and they can think what they want, I guess.
You won the lottery there. A lot of people get the other version of that, right?
I know. Yeah. Well, I got both, but there was just the one particular year that I think that really stood out to me, mostly just because I was like sitting there trying not to giggle, as the teacher clearly was just sort of like had this face like she was holding a dead fish out at like length and trying to pretend that everything was fine, but there was this sort of like squinched up nose, like it was like, I feel gross having to do this, and I was just like, yeah, you should.
I'm required to tell you that, and open quote, this, and then, all right, and then we're going to move on back to the real thing.
Now we're going to dissect some frogs, anyway.
So,
the next year they were prohibited from saying that they have to say this, so it's like, I'm not being compelled to tell you. Sorry.
Are you allowed to, I guess, you would be at that point lying because you are being compelled.
I think talking about an NDA, and this isn't an NDA, but, there's I don't know, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm sure that if they pass something saying you can't say we're making you tell people this, it's like, okay, I won't say that you're making me tell people this. I'm definitely not being forced to tell you. Like, all right, take me to court.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. He also says that evolutions are slow as part of this whole evolutions are stupid post.
How slow are they?
Suppose there's a beneficial mutation which conveys a fitness advantage of 3%, which is actually pretty darn good for a single mutation. On average, bearers of this gene have 1.03 times as many children as non-bearers, which is what 3% means. Assuming that the mutation spreads at all, how long will it take to spread through the whole population? Depends on the population size. A gene conveying 3% fitness advantage spreading through a population of 100,000 would require an average of 768 generations to reach universality in the gene pool, which is a lot.
It goes more into this equation, but I feel like it doesn't make good audio.
Yeah, and also points out a mutation that conveying a 3% advantage has a 6% chance of spreading, at least on that one occasion. In a population of 1 million, you may have to wait 100 generations for another chance, and then it still only has a 6% chance of fixating. So it's very slow.
Yeah, there's no evolution fairy who can watch the gene pool and say, that gene seems to be spreading rapidly. I should distribute it to everyone. And in a human market economy, someone who's legitimately getting 20% returns on investment, especially if there's an obvious clear mechanism behind it, can rapidly acquire more capital from other investors. Others will start duplicating those enterprises. Genes, though, have to spread without stock markets or banks or imitators. As if Henry Ford had to make one car, sell it, buy the parts for 1.01 more cars on average, sell those cars, and keep doing this until he was up to 1 million cars.
He also says that anything that requires previous genes to work is going to take even longer to go, because if you need an allele B, which depends on allele A, you first have to wait for allele A being advantageous of itself and take 1,000 generations to fixate in the gene pool, and only then can allele B start rising to fixation. And again, will take another 1,000 generations. So just really, really, really slow.
Not so bad if you're a bacteria, but pretty bad if you're people.
Yeah,
All
if your generation is, a day or two.
My high school education is fading. Remind me the difference between an allele and a gene.
A gene is a single coding pair, right?
Mm-hmm.
And an allele is an actual combination of genes that has an effect on the organism. Yes?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Okay.
So a gene would just be any base pair?
I believe so.
Maybe.
Yeah,
It
we
doesn't
can
matter.
look this up. An allele is definitely a combination of things that...
Yeah, it's sort of like it codes for a phenotype,
yeah.
which
Oh, I can just look this up on my... Oh, no. Google Docs doesn't let me just do look up. Fine. Be that way,
should
phone.
we like timestamp this?
Oh, no, an allele isn't a single base... I mean, a gene isn't a single base pair. It is a sequence of
Yeah.
base pairs that encodes a protein.
And then an allele must be something...
It's bigger than that. It's like a bunch of genes, or like it's a like it sort of it encodes for a phenotype where genes are sort of the lower level below that.
Phenotype being the expression of
Yeah.
the genetic makeup.
Allele, one of two or more alternate forms of a gene that arise by mutation and are found at the same place on a chromosome.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so an
that high school
allele is
coming
a
back?
variation on a gene.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we can each have genes for head hair, but most of us have dark hair. But if one of us is blonde, I have the blonde allele, you have the brunette allele. Okay, got it.
Okay.
Okay, I knew the difference, but I forgot. Okay. But the whole point of this is that evolution is working just... Did he use the phrase blind idiot god yet, or does that come up later in the
That
That was
was-
in the previous sequences when we were
That's
talking
right,
about
yeah. I'm surprised he didn't use it in these two posts, because it's just... You could keep just putting it in glowing neon letters every paragraph, and it would be like, remember, blind idiot, design.
yeah.
Um,
Although like it's a blind idiot only from sort of a human values. Like the whole point of I feel like I kind of feel bad that I don't think we spent enough time on or did enough justice to the evolution as a alien god.
Okay. Well, we got a minute now.
Yeah, it was just like the main point of that one was that this is just the way evolution works has nothing to do with human values or like any kind of values that we can really understand. It just cares about what was it, inclusive reproductive fitness.
Yeah.
And it's a reproductive fitness maximizer,
Yeah.
and that's all it cares about. So it's almost like a rogue AI that just like you gave it one thing and it's going to maximize that, and you could end up having paperclip effects.
Yeah.
But
How many grandchildren will this gene produce?
yeah,
yeah, it's. I mean, yes, a blind and idiot are both kind of loaded terms, but that's
Well,
intentional.
Also, blind is a good term for it as well, because it's not like evolution is intentionally maximizing for how many children will be produced or grandchildren will be produced. It's
kind
just
of a
like
byproduct of it.
yeah, it's just like
Existing.
here's a mutation, and then the thing reproduces, and either it dies or it doesn't, and that determines what has more children. But there was never like a goal in mind.
See, what's fun is I left high school knowing a bit about evolution and entered college being educated enough about it to not argue with teachers, but kind of argue with teachers, and not even about like ones that were anti-evolution, but ones that were just like wrong. Because I remember one, and it wasn't a biology class. Someone said something about like, oh yeah, there's the species of butterfly that this area was ravaged by wildfires and changed the way that all the trees looked.
Oh,
And
it wasn't wildfires. I think it was when coal production became really big.
Are you
in
talking
England.
about the pepper moth?
I have no idea, but that sounds right. But
The trees went from being white bark to dark bark just because of all the ash.
yeah, so the butterflies
Industrialization
changed.
made everything black, so these moths that had been white started to turn black.
Yeah, and so the teacher was like, yeah, and that's because there was like this he used evolutionary pressure in a more anthropomorphic sense than it should have been used. And I was like, no, evolution didn't like make them darker because that was a good idea to fit the environment.
All the light ones died.
Yeah.
Right. And I was like, yeah, that's just you happen to get dark variants and those ones are more successful because they were harder to find. And he was like, yeah, but there might have been like kind of like a push. I'm like, there's no pushing.
Yeah.
There's nothing
Only
to push.
pulling.
There's just massive murder.
There's only pulling. I like
I've
that a
always
lot. I
liked
wish I thought to put it
describe
that way.
evolution as a system of non-random death,
Yeah.
where like
That's the best way
it's
to put
not
it.
the well, it doesn't encapsulate everything that's going on, but like
Because there's also
it
non-random
helps to-
reproducing.
yeah, well, it helps to push against the whole sort of grandiose evolution is this force for good. It's like sort of it's like a replacement god. There's this force that just like it pushes you to be better. First of all, better, like by what it makes you like better able to survive in your environment, which is changing all the time, but that doesn't mean you're better. Like there's no evolution that has made an animal better objectively than like the previous state. It's just like the environment's changed. This one's better at surviving in this environment.
And it doesn't
Predators
ever make an animal better. It just makes the
Yeah.
species better
But like you see these like
on average.
pictures of the March of Evolution where it shows like a ape slowly becoming a human, and it's supposed to be this. It has this like upward trajectory of like. And I just like get pissed off about that because I'm like, evolution doesn't give a shit about making anything better. If it just wants you to have more kids, it doesn't want anything. Like it's like,
yeah, it's as valueless as water flowing downhill. Like this is just what happens.
These are the ones that didn't die.
Yeah,
they were the best at not dying.
Did we already have an episode about you are in Newcomb's problem?
We talked about the double box experiment at some point, I think.
Yeah, but have we talked about the one where the idea is that Azathoth has put you inside the boxes?
No.
All right, I kind of want this to be our next episode because it works so well with the evolution thing that we're talking about right now.
I've been trying to ask people what they want to see more of in Bayesian Conspiracy, like just on the Discord, and I just keep hearing more. We want you to talk more about cool stuff that you're excited about, so I'm totally down to talk about a cool thing that you're excited about.
I'm into it.
Okay. Alrighty. Then, okay, we can talk more about that after the show, because right now we should continue on with the actual show. Oh, wait, one last thing about the sequence, not about off-topic stuff, about the sequence itself. He says humans can do things that evolutions probably can't do, period, over the expected lifetime of the universe. As the eminent biologist Cynthia Kenyon once put it at a dinner I had the honor of attending. Ooh, name drop in there, but pretty awesome. One grad student can do things in an hour that evolution could not do in a billion years. According to biologists' best current knowledge, evolutions have invented a fully rotating wheel on a grand total of 3 occasions.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Well done. Yeah. I mean, it is, it's impressive if it, again, freely rotating wheels kind of just happens naturally. That's kind of cool.
That is actually pretty damn cool.
But it's like, good for you, evolution. It took you a billion years, but you got it done 3 times. Good on you.
Yeah.
I don't know who Cynthia Kenyon is, but like I never understood why name dropping was gauche. I get it if you're doing it nonstop like Tahani from The Good Place.
Right,
but
yeah.
There, if you happen to say like, I met Richard Dawkins at a conference. Yeah. That happened. It was awesome.
Yeah.
I think it really depends on your like incentives for doing that, because like Tahani in The Good Place was just sort of like bringing up people that were famous that she'd hung out with out of context explicitly, so that people would think like, oh wow, you're so cool that you know all these cool people. But if you're bringing it up to be like, hey, I met this cool person and it was awesome, and let me tell you some things about them, or like it's super relevant to the thing we were just talking about, then like whatever. That's just having a conversation.
Every now and then, like if writing workshops come up, or Brandon Sanderson or something, I sometimes slip in that, I had dinner with him and he's a really cool guy.
With Brandon Sanderson?
Yeah.
Well, he never told me that.
What?
He wrote the last three Wheel of Time books.
And a lot of other books too that are extremely well. But you didn't know that.
But he read books that I wrote. He wrote books that I read.
Although that would be much cooler.
That would be cool.
Yeah,
but seems like Annie Ash needs to name drop more. What I'm taking away.
I guess. Okay. Yeah. No, it was like 3.
You guys got to hang out with Robin Hanson before I was on the show, and I'm still like,
yeah. Weren't you at one of the? No, you weren't in Denver yet at the time when he visited us. Yeah.
Sad.
Next time he's in the neighborhood, but yeah, that's fun.
Yeah. Okay.
Great. Yeah.
So yes, don't praise evolutions 1 millimeter more than they deserve.
Yeah, this was the thing that I saw happen a lot too back during the Evolution Wars, where people, again, because it was just, I'm pro science, fuck you. It was a lot like today's conversation, but with different words. Okay. And you just made more supportive noises. And it's like, no, evolution is awesome. It does all these things. And I remember people just being super vociferous, like intensely defensive and argumentative in favor of how awesome this is. And it wasn't necessarily just evolution, but everything science. Yeah. And it's like, you're kind of fighting the right fight, but you're doing it on the wrong terrain. You don't need to be having this part of the argument.
That's that whole, like, there's nothing I hate more than, like, a bad argument for a side that I agree with.
Yeah.
Because, I kept seeing that thing, too, where it was, like, the religionists were sort of coming in with the premise of, your God is bad, and, like, you're really a religion, science. Mm-hmm. It has its own things that you have to take on faith, like evolution, and then, like, you're trying to say that evolution is this God that did all these cool things, and it's just like, no, we're trying to say that this is what, like, evidence has shown has happened and is continuing to happen. We have lots of proof. You could go see the fossils. You could look at genes. We've, like, and we don't support this, though. We're not saying this is the way things should be done or, like, this is our God and we have to accept the way things are done. In fact, like, really excited about the possibility of us, like, working with CRISPR to make some of the dumb decisions that evolution has made less dumb. Or, just getting robot bodies and not having to deal with any of the squishy shit.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
Would evolution work if things didn't die of old age? I think it still would, because there's other things that would still kill people.
Well, evolution works
prey
because
animals
of
would still be
reproduction, not because of longevity.
Yeah.
I mean, if you live to be 300, who cares if you're not having kids anymore? There's tortoises and jellyfish and some other animals, crabs, I forget, that don't really have any natural death span. Like, they can just sort of keep living forever, but, like, if they're not reproducing anymore, who cares? Evolution doesn't care.
Yeah, it's about, if you take the gene-centric view, it's just about how many more of these gene delivery vehicles can I create to run around the planet.
I guess the question would be, what I'm trying to get at is, does evolution have an incentive is the worst word ever, because again, it's anthropomorphizing. Would evolution be less efficient if all individual organisms could continue reproducing and living without a fixed end date?
That's a really cool question. I'd love to do that experiment, but we don't know.
I would have to give it some thought. I can see an argument being made both ways, because on the one hand, if things weren't dying of old age, they would be continuing to consume resources that everyone else is competing over.
It'd be really hard for the next generation to get a foot in.
Yes, but also if they're like the winners of the current competition, that probably means they're either the biggest or strongest or have the sharpest claws or have the biggest brain. Like, it'd be great if we still had an Einstein or a Feynman around to be having more kids, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sure any tigers out there would be like, man, I really wish we still had the biggest, strongest tiger around to make more tiger babies that are big and strong.
That just makes me wonder if, like, Einstein's genes are still around somewhere. I mean, I know that...
I'm pretty sure I heard about it.
Right?
Yeah.
But, like, also, I don't know.
How much of it has been reverting back to the mean?
Question. Like, we definitely probably shouldn't dig Einstein up and harvest his cells.
Maybe we should.
Inseminate people with them.
Well, if they wanted to volunteer.
Against their will, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you're selecting genes for your kids, be like, hey, do you want some of Einstein's? We've got Hawking, too.
Honestly, as long as we got that technology, maybe just, like, clone Einstein. Because if you're mixing his genes with someone else's genes, then you're going to have some sub-Einstein genes mixed in there.
Yeah, but then you might, like, want to get some variants in there.
It's true.
Because there's ways that Einstein genes could have been better.
We can get an Einstein, and then we can get, like, a von Neumann and gender flip one of them, or sex flip one of them, and then mix up their genes, and then see what we get.
Just make an Einstein and a girl Einstein. And
yeah.
Then, like, of course, they'd fall in love because they're both the same person.
Oh, they'd be like Loki.
Or just do a...
Wait, is that spoilers? Is it too early for spoilers?
I don't know. Maybe you could do, like, a spoiler warning.
I'm in favor of doing a Vault-Tec style science experiment where you just get, like, 150 Einsteins and put them in a vault for a century and see what happens.
And make half of them female Einsteins, though?
No, they just clone themselves.
Oh, okay.
Like the Gary vault from Fallout New Vegas or 3, I forget which one.
Was Gary able to clone himself, though?
He must have been. He was still running around.
Have I managed to convince either of you to read the Bobiverse books?
I want to read them.
This is the premise.
Yeah,
like,
I've heard it's
this
a lot of
person
fun.
is literally a von Neumann probe, and it's this dude who is, like, a good programmer and kind of a cool guy, and gets resurrected from cryo, and yeah, it is...
That's the premise.
Uploaded, put into a von Neumann probe, and, like, go forth and find colonization targets for Earth, which is having some troubles, and make more Bobs. And because of quantum randomness, the clones are not quite the same. Some of them are just like Bob, but a bit more serious, and then some of them are just psychotic. And it's delightful. I love it.
Cool.
It sounds like they're crazy, and they might say, if they were talking to each other, hey, you're crazy like us.
Oh, because that is the topic today.
That was a good segue.
It was okay.
Really quickly before we move on, our less wrong sequences for next time are Natural Selection, Speed Limit, and Complexity Bound, which is one, and Beware of Stephen Jay Gould, which is the other.
Yeah,
that second one doesn't ring a bell.
Guy.
I don't know if I read the second one.
Okay.
I might have at some point, but I don't know if I've read these in order. All right, have fun.
All right. But yes, on to our main subject, Crazy Bobs.
Yeah, so this is a article that was posted on Astral Codex 10, which is the resurrected Slate Star Codex. And a thing I want to ask, do either of you know if there's, like, is it ASX? Because, like, it used to be SSC as the, acronym, because that's a big mouthful. Slate Star Codex or Astral Codex 10.
What I have always seen is ASX, yes.
Okay, so, like, Roman numeral 10, ASX.
Yes.
Yeah.
What's the S?
Oh?
No,
the X as in 10.
Oh, I'm sorry, ACX.
Or, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, can we just keep calling it SSC?
I kind of want to, but I feel like...
But it is a new
maybe
generation
we
of
should
it.
Get used to the new name.
I like that myself, but yeah, eventually there's going to be people a decade down the line being like, who are these old folks and why are they calling it a sequence of letters that has nothing to do with what it actually is?
Someone told them to shut up and get off our lawn.
That's right.
All right, ACX.
So, this is a book review where Scott is talking about the book Crazy Like Us by Ethan Waters. And the subtitle for the book is The Globalization of the American Psyche.
And you wanted to talk about this. What interested you about this in particular?
It just is, I think, a very classic Slate Star Codex piece where Scott does great book reviews. Like, I feel like I've learned more from Scott's book reviews than I would have if I just read the book without any analysis beforehand or whatever.
I think that's a fair way to put a lot of his book reviews.
Oh, yeah.
I haven't read most of the books that he reviews, but like getting a succinct-ish summary of all the main points with some thoughtful stuff interjected in is a really good way to digest what the content of this 400-page book would have been.
Yeah.
Like, I'll never read Seeing Like a State, right? Because I don't need to. I feel like I got a good understanding of it.
Well, I can say that I have both already read some of the books he's reviewed and gotten just a totally new take on them when he reviewed them. And also, like, a really good example is the one about diets, The Hungry Brain.
Yeah.
I hadn't heard of that one before. He did a great book review of it, and then like I went and read the whole book, and I feel like I got way more out of reading the whole book than I would have if I hadn't started with his review.
Huh.
Like, Scott's just really good at breaking these down. So let's break this down.
All right. So it is basically about how the U.S. idea, specifically I think it is mostly American psychiatry, is exporting our ideas of what mental health is and what the treatment for it should look like to the rest of the world, right?
Yeah, he calls it falling biodiversity, like specifically in the context of, he says, sometimes we apply the same metaphor to the human world, e.g. falling linguistic biodiversity, when minority languages get replaced by English or whatever, but in Crazy Like Us, Waters is sounding the alarm about falling psychiatric biodiversity, which means basically, looks like everybody around the world is starting to have the same mental illnesses, to understand them in the same way, and to be applying the same treatments to them, which is an interesting observation, but hang on, I'm trying to remember if somebody wants to talk while I...
Sure. I found his most interesting section to be the first section, which was about anorexia in Hong Kong, because that also seemed like the most clear-cut, I guess, sort of section. Where it was pointed out that until the 90s, there was almost no anorexia in Hong Kong. And I guess we should say 1990s, although I don't think there's any chance of us being listened to post-2090, right?
Hopefully. We should caveat. Yeah.
Okay. Just in case people are listening to this in the year 2100. Yeah, this is in the 1990s we're talking about. Until then, there was almost no anorexia in Hong Kong. There was some, but the cases were extremely rare, and they were generally people who, like, knew that they weren't eating and were really distressed by this because they were losing weight and it was very unhealthy, and they were going to a psychologist to help them figure out how they can start eating again.
Yeah, but it looked nothing like anorexia in Western culture, where it's about patriarchal beauty norms and starving yourself in order to
Be
fulfill
super thin.
those concerns about obesity, etc. This was depressed people not eating enough, and
Yeah, it didn't have much to do with like body image dysmorphia, I guess.
Yeah.
Would be the best way to call it. But that all changed on November 24th, 1994, when a photogenic schoolgirl collapsed and died on a busy Hong Kong street in the middle of rush hour.
which, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I know.
Imagine just some chick just falling down and dying in front of you.
Yeah, and she'd somehow managed to like not get hospitalized at any time before this. She just went straight to dying. That's pretty... I think that's
real
unusual
extreme.
for anorexia. Yeah, usually they faint or something and get taken to a hospital before that goes to straight death.
They bring that up a bunch of times in the review, too, about, like, it is a thing that keeps coming up where it's like, yeah, like, anorexia is usually diagnosed early, or it's one of those things that, like, it's hard to hide because you keep fainting.
Yeah.
Or, like, you look incredibly unhealthy.
Yeah.
So...
But it turns out that, you know, this was captured on camera, made all the news, like it was a big media thing, but it was also a condition that most Hong Kongers had never heard of. So, Western experts were flown in to hold public awareness campaigns where they went on TV and said that it's this debilitating condition with the patriarchy-based beauty standards, all that stuff like you said, and it was no doubt rampant in Hong Kong, and it was important that everyone be aware of how rampant it is so the problems of ignorance and underdiagnosis could be fixed. And after a few months of this, there were loads of anorexia cases, hundreds of times as many before the public awareness campaign, But all the psychiatrists there were like, this is fucking bizarre because there just wasn't this before the public awareness campaign. And I wouldn't want to say the consensus necessarily, but there is a very strong suspicion that this was literally caused by the public awareness campaign, by making people aware of this, and then they started...
That was the thing I was trying to find, because the premise of the book was this sort of export of Western concepts and treatments, etc., of mental health disorders. Mm-hmm. But I just sort of want to skip ahead and read the first bit of the conclusion, where I should say, like, it's number 5 is the conclusion. The first 4, we can go back into them because some of them are, like, still super interesting, but it's sort of this repetition of, this thing didn't exist in this country, or at least in the form that, like, we all know and love it, and
I think
sarcasm.
It'd be good to hit on some of them a little bit.
Oh, I do want to, but, like, the thing that Scott thought was interesting, though, well, he says, overall, I was only moderately interested in the book's thesis about globalization of American concepts of mental health. I was more interested in a sort of sub-thesis that kept recurring under the surface. Does naming and pointing to a mental health problem make it worse?
Right.
And he says this was the clearest in Hong Kong, where a seemingly very low base of anorexia exploded as soon as people started launching mental health awareness campaigns, saying it was a common and important disease. And, yeah, then we can go back and...
I think you're jumping right to the grand finale.
Yeah,
we're doing all this teasing and leading up and flirting, and you're like, bam, here's the penis.
But I feel like that's the thing that I also am the most interested in here and want to talk about with these different cases. Like, let's see, there was anorexia.
There was
the second one was depression in Japan.
Yes, but he quickly, before we move off anorexia, there was also apparently in the 19th century neurotic illnesses among women, which were often called hysteria, which is now a very bad word. But there were things like nervous tics and paralysis of the limbs, blindness, amnesia, all those sorts of things, none of which are around today anymore, interestingly enough, as symptoms of depression or anxiety.
Yeah, and like the premise there was just that, like, there was this concept that hysteria was this thing women got. It literally means wandering womb, I think, in Greek, because people
the Greeks didn't know how bodies worked.
They didn't quite know how bodies work, so they thought that the womb was just this sort of organ that wasn't attached to any of the rest of your body and floated around and could cause all kinds of problems if it was in the wrong place. Or
I don't understand.
That's why ladies are so nuts, right, fellas?
I mean, because
of the crazy womb that floats around and haunts you.
If nothing else, I assume soldiers know enough about anatomy to know that, like, where the heart is that you need to stab, where the lungs are.
Have you ever seen a body split open? Because it just looks like a big gelatinous mess. If you don't know what you're looking for and you haven't looked at anatomical charts your whole life or dissected frogs in high school, like, you don't know what the hell's going on in there.
I could swear that most soldiers know approximately where the heart is.
Well,
and that it's hard to stab at, but that's the thing, that if you can hit it...
If you hit the chest, generally, you're going to puncture it lung or hit the heart or
you're
just do enough,
them.
There's going to be enough bleeding, so, like, yeah, sure, okay.
If you can get between the ribs, yeah.
Like, nobody was really... I mean, because of religious concerns about the body,
right?
There wasn't even really dissections. People who dissected cadavers in order to try to learn more about them were doing so, like, at risk of being found out and jailed and probably, like, stoned to death.
As necromancers.
Yeah, or as yeah, you know. Or necrophiliacs. But, like, so there was just this whole idea that there was this disease that women got called hysteria that caused this random list of things, and then people would actually perform this random list of things. And I think there's something really interesting about that was like the thing I wanted to hit at here, the premise that if you define a thing and it becomes like really common knowledge in that culture, is that sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy where maybe like everybody's sort of pointing at, for example, depression, but it can present in all these bizarre ways.
Yeah.
But if you say, okay, depression looks like anhedonia, like loss of interest in things that you used to like, excessive sleeping, low mood, etc., etc., people who have depression maybe just sort of latch onto that and start being like, oh yeah, I have that, and start even performing those things because they sort of take on the identity as person with depression.
I agree, but I also don't think like it's an intentional performance. Like, I think...
No, I don't think that at all.
There's mental strain and stress and just like bad psychological stuff going down, and you're told by society this is how people react to that, and then that's what people do.
Well, you're told specifically also, if you want to be recognized as having this diagnosis and get help, you need to you need to fit this criteria for the diagnosis, which
Yeah, but I don't think people think that way.
No,
They're
I don't.
just like,
I don't think.
oh my god, I can't see now.
I'm trying to say I don't think very many people, or maybe any of them, are strategically going, I'm gonna perform all of these things so I can get the good drugs. But I think that there is sort of this cultural understanding of what it looks like to be a depressed person, and depressed people will reenact that.
That's a really compelling point. Was that made in the post? Because that.
Yeah.
Oh well, I breezed over that.
That's why I
somehow.
jumped ahead to the conclusion, because that was the thing that the author was trying to say was the interesting idea that maybe the West is exporting its global expectations about what things look like. But Scott said the more interesting thing here is the way that you keep seeing that when there's a public awareness campaign, suddenly hundreds and hundreds of people are coming in saying, I have that thing, yes.
Yeah.
Where before they didn't. Were they hiding it? Were they having different symptoms or expressions of it, or maybe they just didn't know how to express it, so they were just depressed but pretending to be super happy because that was what it was acceptable in their culture. And
well, we've, at least most of us have talked to the people, the three of us in the room anyway, have talked to people who probably have something along the lines of ADD or ADHD.
I definitely have it.
Oh, I know, yeah. I mean, I have something enough like that where I've got the prescribed drugs to fix it. But no, I mean, we've talked to people who have it, and they're having difficulties getting their doctors to prescribe them that stuff. And it's okay, well, they want you to exhibit these things.
Yeah.
If they're dick doctors, my doctor was cool enough. I told him, I was look, I'm on Wellbutrin. Apparently that works well with Adderall, and it would help me from the other side of the problem I'm having. And he's like, yeah, man, that makes perfect sense. In fact, you're right. That's what we tend to prescribe these in tandem anyway. So I had a cool doctor. I think some people have cool doctors, but those who don't, I've seen people get advice. It's okay, well, they want you to answer questions like this. So they want you to present
they
in the way...
They give you a questionnaire that you have to be able to, say that I have 9 out of 10 of these things, and
exactly.
then that's gatekeeping you from the drugs that'll help you.
Yeah.
This speaks to me in particular because I, am self-diagnosing as autistic. Also ADD, I guess. I never really got an official prescription for that, but, prescription? Diagnosis. But, I'd never presented typically for these things. I didn't have the hyperactivity thing. I was by, the teachers that observed me, and parents and whatnot all thought that I was a good kid who, was good at schoolwork, did homework, conscientious, kind, etc. But, this was a performance that I felt my whole culture and society was saying young ladies do and young ladies do not. And I needed to perform this young ladiness or I would be punished. And a lot of that involved not climbing trees. It came out in other ways. But the same thing with autism where female typical autism looks different from male typical autism. And there's still this huge problem with actually ADD and autism are some of these I think worst examples of ways that there's a female typical and a male typical version. The male typical version is considered the correct one.
Yeah, this is something that I'm glad that psychological medicine is growing past, where
I said, I don't have an official diagnosis for either of these, and I got a full neuropsych evaluation, and my doctor basically told me no, you it's okay, you don't have autism, you're you just have autism traits that were caused by other things, it seems and I was just but that's the same, autism's not a disease that you have or don't, it's the collection of traits. It's the person and I think that he was trying to reassure me he was concerned with
didn't catch the autism.
Yeah, well, he's an older dude who actually was retired, but he still does neuropsych evaluations because it's interesting to him. I think the stuff he had to say was super valuable and interesting, but he seemed very reluctant to want to give anybody a diagnosis because it felt to him, there's these misunderstood collections of traits that can be worked with in other ways, and then if you get sort of branded with this diagnosis, it's going to be this impediment, and people they're not coming in here to try to get a confirmation. They want the confirmation that they're okay. And I was sort of no, I kind of want the confirmation that what I've felt my whole life is correct.
It's interesting because he's kind of taking the approach that the Post implicitly is advocating for, right? Where it's no, don't go in there and just throw labels at people's regular stuff, right?
Yeah.
Don't give them a thing to anchor on and insist that they have a problem because they fit these 3 things. But this guy took the other end of that extreme,
Yeah,
where
well,
it's
just
like,
because you fit all these things doesn't mean you have this syndrome. Like, these could just be all because of other stuff. And I'm just like, from my perspective, I was like, it doesn't matter what caused it, where it's from, whatever. Like, I have these deficiencies, I have these patterns of behavior and things that I struggle with. And, like, I sort of wanted validation of that. But
yeah, no, I mean, so I think he did it wrong. I just think it's interesting because it took the other side of what this post is doing, or
yeah,
to my reading of it, or parts of it anyway. Like when I was in college, I went to go see a therapist, and I filled out like the paperwork that's like, are you depressed or do you have bipolar? And I recognized it didn't say like at the top, do you have these? It's just I recognized what the tests were doing, and
yeah, they're not very subtle.
no, but I filled out the bipolar one, and I was like, this is gonna tell you I have bipolar disease, but I don't, because the questions are like, do you have periods in your life where like
Do you sometimes have one mood and then it changes to a different mood?
or like, you know, radical upswings in mood? Do you have periods where like you're having way more sexual activity than other periods and stuff? And I'm like,
everyone?
well,
Are you
yeah,
sometimes
well, basically.
impulsive and sometimes really risk averse?
But it was questions like that, but it was more apropos to my situation because my now wife was in New York getting her master's, and so it's like, yes, I have increased, and I explained that when I handed the doctor the paperwork. I was like, yeah, I have increased periods of happiness and sexual activity when we're visiting, and less when we're not. You know, so it's
Not
like,
because I'm bipolar, it's because literally my wife is away for 3 months.
right. So that's the thing is like if they had said like, oh well, look, you fit this, you need to get on some lithium fast and get you chilled out because you have bipolar disorder. It's like, well, no, I don't. So there's definitely a line to walk there, and your doctor took one bad extreme, and my doctor was walking that line just fine because it's a rather thick line. But
Yeah. I think his heart was in the right place too, and primarily he said that he evaluates children. And so I understand like somebody not wanting to just slap this lifelong label of deficient on a child.
I do notice that we are back to talking about how Western psychiatric
Norms.
norms, define mental illnesses rather than whether this is like a thing that can or should be done. I guess like going back to the whole 19th century hysteria thing. Part of the thing that he pointed out was that around the 50s, some of them started having something like anorexia. And so psychiatrists found that fascinating and wrote a bunch of papers, and then it became a common topic of discussion.
And then suddenly everybody had it.
Yes, and then anorexia started spreading as from one of the rarest symptoms to one of the most common. And around 1900 it peaked, after which point it stopped being interesting because it was so often. People didn't write about it as much or talk about it as much, and it trailed off. And then in the 1940s it was vanishingly rare again.
Yeah, and
Because
what
it
was
got boring.
Let's see.
I think it was around here that...
Oh, can I talk about... Sorry, you finish your thought.
Okay, sure. It was around here that he says the thing which I was bringing up earlier, but I like his wording better. I bolded it when I pulled it out. Watto suggests there's probably some base level objectively real mental illness. If you have to think of it as something, you can think of it as a formless extreme stress looking for an outlet. But the particular way the stress finds an outlet is based on the patient's cultural preconceptions. If you believe that stressed people go blind, you'll go blind. If you believe that stressed people act possessed by demons, you'll act possessed by demons. And if you believe that stressed people become obsessed with being really thin and starve themselves, you might become obsessed with being really thin and starve yourself.
Yeah, can I talk about Sing Lee?
Yeah.
So, Scott mentions this researcher, Sing Lee, who was the guy in Hong Kong studying cases of anorexia. So, sort of the thing that you were just talking about, Ash, about the formless stress trying to find an outlet. You're saying, like, well, okay, so maybe some people have a certain predisposition where their body just gets stuck in extreme dieting mode and refuses to go back, in the example of anorexia. That would explain why medieval nuns who got too into fasting got it. That was one of the examples that was a link that's fascinating. It would explain why modern Westerners who get too into looking beautiful get it. It would explain why pre-1990 Hong Kongers who were really depressed and couldn't eat got it. It would even explain why Sing Lee got it. So Sing Lee, the psychiatrist whose work on Hong Kong anorexia frames the chapter, had a proper old-school experimental temperament. I want to fist bump this guy, sort of. And decided he wouldn't be able to treat anorexics unless he really understood them. So he decided to starve himself, and for the first 3 months it was just as unpleasant as you'd expect. After that it started being really fun, and he felt great about it, and he had to call off the experiment because he didn't want to actually give himself anorexia. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure how to square this with culture-bound syndrome position. Maybe whether or not given an extreme diet, becomes anorexia is culture bound. Maybe learning about anorexia inspires a bunch of wanorexics who then start dieting. I don't know. It doesn't really fit.
I do remember anorexia seeming somewhat like, I hate to use the term fashionable, but almost fashionable, because it was like what the high status, really pretty people did.
Well, that super gets into the next thing about depression in Japan, where depression became really fashionable.
Yeah.
Until, like, the culture had to push back against it.
This is the coolest thing.
Yeah, like...
Well, I'm not sure coolest is a good term, but super interesting.
I laughed when I read this, and, like, it's maybe some dark humor, but, there was this trend in Japan, basically, where, okay, depression became recognized as a disease, but, like, the people writing about it managed to make it, like, sound very sympathetic, to the point that people started interpreting it as, well, people who have depression are really just... probably like cinnamon rolls who are too good for this world, and they're...
Can I read the line?
Yeah, please do. In fact, it was really good.
So the term used was neurasthenic.
Yeah.
It said being neurasthenic became first a fashion, then a class marker. The idea was that neurasthenics were people who were working too hard, meaning they're good and admirable, who were so smart and doing so much furious intellectual activity that it was straining their nerves, which is impressive, and also they were probably sensitive souls too pure for this world.
Yep.
The most embarrassing extreme happened in 1903 when some photogenic Japanese youth carved a poem in a tree, went to a beautiful waterfall, and leapt to his death. Everyone praised him for how sensitive and artistic and neurasthenic this was, and turned him into a posthumous national hero. Meanwhile, in 1902, an article reported that fully 1/3 of patients visiting hospital for consultations were suffering from the new disease.
Can I take the next part?
Sure. Finally, everyone struck a compromise and agreed to fix this, and agreed that most of the lower class patients weren't really neurasthenics, hardworking, intelligent, sensitive, admirable, but had a similar condition, imitating the symptoms of neurasthenia, based on being too weak and pathetic to cope. This seemed to do the trick, and people stopped coming to the hospital with neurasthenia symptoms.
Can I just read the quote, though?
Yes.
Because this was from the 1906 Japanese Neurology Journal, where they were like, oh shit, we've made depression look too, like, palatable. We need to make it bad again.
Yeah.
So here's the quote. These days, young students talk about such stuff as the philosophy of life. They confront important and profound problems of life, are defeated, and develop neurasthenia. Those who jump off a waterfall or throw themselves in front of a train are weak-minded. They do not have a strong mental constitution and develop mental illness, dying in the end. How useless they are. Such weak-minded people would only cause harm, even if they remained alive. At which point, a bunch of people, like, almost nobody had this disorder anymore, magically. Which, like, ethics there are super weird both ways, both praising and then sort of condemning people for having depression.
Yeah.
But
there needed to be some kind of balance. He says, it seems as if acceptance of neurasthenia had been so successful that psychiatrists felt obliged to re-stigmatize this mental disorder in hopes of limiting its adoption. And it worked.
I guess it worked.
Yeah.
But, like, the thing that I'm concerned about there, like, Japan does have incredibly high levels of depression and suicide.
Mm-hmm.
And, like...
You don't want to dismiss it as just being trendy.
Yeah,
It brings us back to the whole, like you said, does naming and pointing to a mental health problem make it worse?
I don't know. I mean, that's an interesting question because, like, the data seems to suggest that yes, but then also Scott brings up a bunch of other, you know, like, for example, he talks about Paxil beginning to, like, they needed to go market themselves in the Japanese market, and so they did a public awareness campaign about, like, depression sucks, Paxil can help, or whatever. And people just flooded the clinics, being like, yes, I have that, please give me Paxil. And Scott said, maybe it was just that all these people were suffering, and were like, oh, there's a name for this thing I have, thank God, and there's a treatment, and, like, that seems relatable, or it's reasonable. It's relatable, too, because, like, I also sort of grew up in a family that didn't believe in science-based medicine or mental health issues, and so I also had that sort of, oh my God, there are, like, things like autism and ADD and OCD describe things that, like, patterns that I've been struggling with my whole life, and there's whole bodies of research dedicated to this, and there's therapy and there's treatments. Oh my God.
It's really hard because, like, I've known people that definitely have distinct issues but won't get help, like refuse to, right?
And it's so frustrating.
Yeah, and with those people you want to, like, destigmatize this a little bit and be like, you really you really should get some help. Pilots, especially, I've heard, have a problem with this because if you have
Pilots, like airplane pilots, I'm guessing.
yeah, if you have any sort of diagnosis for any sort of mental thing, you lose your pilot's license.
So when I was...
And so instead they labor without getting treatment or medication, and that makes things worse, which you don't want someone with untreated depression or anxiety or whatever flying your plane, because that just makes the risk of everyone on the plane dying much worse.
Yeah, I don't know about pilots, but I mean, I've heard that air traffic controller is the single most stressful position, like job out there. I could kind of believe it because it is this like you need to be able to multitask and do everything exactly right and keep all these like strings of data, and like if you fuck up even a little bit, like there are all these lives relying on you. But then there's also that you're at sort of a distance from it, which I know fucks up a lot of people that like man drones, for example, in Afghanistan or whatever.
Yeah.
Where kind of you drive into the office, you pilot a drone, maybe you blow up a school, like maybe, I don't know, you see some terrible shit, and like you clock out at the end of the day, you drive home, you make dinner for your family, and you got to just sort of compartmentalize, and that seems not like a thing that humans are good at doing, or that like a healthy situation for a human to be in.
But it also, I don't know, maybe this is just me. I think I'm not alone in this, but like there's something really romantic about a whole lot of mental illnesses that just, I find them like attractive and compelling. And I think that's not unusual. And, then that's a problem because...
Like Ophelia from Macbeth, right? Was Ophelia in Macbeth? Now I'm trying to remember Shakespeare. God damn it.
I don't know much about Shakespeare.
I don't either, but I'm thinking like Picasso or every romantic painter and artist, or
Van Gogh.
Yeah.
Cutting off his ear. He was such a tortured soul.
Every beat poet had all those, so it's like they're I don't know if I share the attraction that you described, but I think I can articulate it, or at least understand it, because people seem to like these suffering artists.
Yeah.
And that's this romanticized trope.
Ophelia's from Hamlet. I just mentioned this because this is a character who, I don't know, Hamlet's doing his dumb shit because he thinks like the ghost of his father's come back, and he's just running around doing dumb shit, and then like his wife or fiance Ophelia sort of bears the brunt of this, goes mad, and then drowns herself. And she drowns herself specifically after Hamlet like goes off on her. But like there's all like I'm looking at there's a painting by Sir John Everett Millais. I don't know how to pronounce, like, I guess that's a French thing, even though he's British. But so I'll show you guys this painting. There's a lot of artwork and like depictions of this character Ophelia that romanticize her, and specifically the painting I'm showing them, I'll link it to, is this really beautiful painting where she's drowned, but she's laying there looking very beautiful, holding a string of flowers in this picturesque nature, like. And yeah, we get that kind of thing where it's just like, oh, this is so romantic, oh, this is so tragic, and I think that really appeals to people though that like do feel oppressed, or like people with suicidal ideation often sort of have this idea that life is so hard, it would be so easy to just give up, and then like also I could really show those people who didn't believe me or who treated me badly. And
I know this is gonna date me a bit, but I feel guilty about this, but I can't help feeling the same way about like Kurt Cobain and Axl Rose, because they were both insanely talented musicians, just absolutely phenomenal, and they were both fucking gorgeous. And Axl Rose nowadays has grown old and not attractive anymore. He doesn't put out good music anymore. It's like he's going back and playing his old hits to people who are old fans, and he's a multimillionaire, and that's great and everything. But like, it's like I still listen to the old Guns N' Roses stuff and I feel emotions. But like when I listen to old Nirvana stuff and I just think, Jesus Christ, he killed himself at 27, and how much more could he have done? And oh my God, he was pretty. And like, it just feels so fucking tragic that like,
yeah,
that legacy is far more cemented in my mind and my emotions than
really
Axl Rose's.
a thing that a lot of artists struggle with too. Like,
and it's really fucked up. Like, you shouldn't
even
have
just
to
young
murder
people
yourself.
in culture, yeah, like that whole idea of like, I don't want to live to be old and unattractive and not relevant.
Yeah.
Was that like Kurt Cobain's and Amy Winehouse's motivation, that they don't want to be old and unattractive?
No, I think they probably were struggling with lots of untreated mental disorders.
Yeah.
He had a ton of depression, and he also had extreme pain from back issues. So, a combination of problems.
A lot of people who are incredibly prolific and artistic do struggle primarily actually with bipolar, but a bunch of other things too, schizophrenia, etc. These mental disorders can be really motivating, and
Yeah.
like, but there's this whole issue of, do we glorify them? You know, do we, what did they call it in the article?
Well, it's hard not to glorify it a little bit, you know? I think, and then it's also really hard to talk bad about the dead once they've killed themselves. Like, are you going to shit on him for being weak and killing himself?
Right.
But if you don't, I don't know. It seems like you could make the problem worse.
You don't want to make that a role model.
All right. Like Virgin Suicides, I haven't actually seen it, but I hear it's really good. But then it also, there was a wave of teenage girl suicides not long after.
Yeah, and then that's the thing that I keep coming back to where it comes to anorexics. But you do see copycat murders, you see copycat suicides. Like, humans are really all about looking at the people around them and trying to determine, you know, what behaviors are acceptable and correct for them to do. And so, like, re-stigmatizing depression in Japan, was that the wrong thing to do? I don't know. Like, there's a really interesting question there that is, like, also the main thing that I thought was interesting about this article. We can go more into the, like, different examples that we haven't touched on too, because those are interesting. But just the whole, like, what do you do if you're trying, if your goal is to try to help people who have these mental disorders? Like, is it more ethical to do a public awareness campaign where a bunch of people, maybe who've just been suffering in silence, might come out and be like, oh, thank God there's a name for this thing, there's a treatment for it, like, please recognize me. But, like, with the possibility that people are going to just sort of, I don't know, honestly, glorify it. And
I think we've gone a little bit too far in the extreme of making everything super public aware and telling everyone you probably have this thing. Like, I think there's, at this point, a lot of good that could be done from pulling back and telling people, hey, you know what? Mental illness isn't that debilitating of a thing. You can deal with it. Stop, you know, toughen up a little bit. The world isn't supposed to pander to your every need.
I struggle with that because that's sort of what I was told my whole life, and I just, like, look back and think about how much better my life would have been if anybody had been able to diagnose me as autistic and like try to do interventions. I, like, sort of the thing that Charlie said before when we were talking about their childhood, and it was just like, that really stuck with me because this is just, like, it's tempting to be like, oh, your struggles have sort of made you who you are, and, or like, you know, and Charlie said, like, no, I didn't succeed because of my struggles and they made me like a stronger, better person. I succeeded in spite of them. I'm still a much worse off person than I would have been if I hadn't had those struggles, because they did in fact hurt me and hold me back a lot.
Yeah.
And like,
well, I'm glad I got diagnosed as depressive. It helped a lot. Once I had that diagnosis, I got some medication, I got some treatment. It made things less bad. Still not good, but I mean, the thing that actually made it good was removing me from the circumstances that made life terrible. And I don't know, I would have rather, if it would have been possible, to treat the root cause rather than addressing some of the symptoms.
Yeah, I do feel that too, where
but addressing symptoms is a lot easier.
A thing that I did get a diagnosis for was major depressive disorder, and I got that diagnosis and just felt like, I don't identify with this. I never, like, my primary struggle to me never felt like depression. I struggled with social anxiety, social awkwardness, panic attacks, OCD. I had trichotillomania. It's like in remission now since I got on Adderall, so like knock wood or whatever, but I've had that since I was 12 or 13, where you just pull your hair out compulsively, and it's nightmarish. And then just also the stigma. When, like, you're the whole thing about re-stigmatizing or like deliberately stigmatizing mental disorders feels really gross to me, because I spent my whole life with, like, my parents would find pictures of me as a little girl with long hair down to my butt and be like, look, you used to have such beautiful hair. Why are you doing this? Why are you ruining your hair? Like, is it because we're bad parents? Is it our fault? Like, and then, you know, just like yelling at me to stop when they saw me doing it, expressing disapproval when they saw me either without or with hair extensions or wigs. Like, is that your real hair? Like, I think that just exacerbates stuff where it was like, I felt just tons of guilt and shame for having a mental disorder, and I think that's fucked up. I don't think anybody should have to deal with having a mental disorder and then also being told that they're a bad person. Like, this whole, like, I was laughing at it because it, like, just because of the ridiculousness of the fact that this is somebody that, like, actually wrote this and that people read it. But yeah, like, people who have depression are just really weak-willed and can't deal with life.
I know. I mean, that's fucked up. And
I mean, that's the opposite message you want to send, but if you're trying to do it to curb an epidemic of people who got the wrong idea about it.
Which is worse, though, if people like commit suicide or just struggle in silence with depression, or if people who maybe don't have depression like go take SSRIs and post on their blog about how very, very depressed they are. Like,
Can I?
So I think that's sort of the question, right? Like with the anorexia thing in China, for example, like was it actually a problem? Oh, sorry, Hong Kong.
Which I guess is now China, but
Yeah.
it wasn't then.
Okay. Was it a problem in 1990? It seems unclear, but it's as Scott points out, it's one of those diseases that's kind of hard to like hide. And so you would think that there would have been cases that were findable in 1990 and that it wouldn't have taken until 1995 when it got popular.
I think people can be very oblivious, though. Like when like there was the case that sparked the national controversy of a woman just dropping dead in the street. Somebody should have noticed that she was struggling, right?
And if she'd been aware that, hey, my behavior is, and my desires and my compulsions, yeah, there's a thing for this. I can go to a doctor and ask, hey, I think I've got this thing, and then yeah, so there's enormous benefit in having like a label that you can pursue a solution to, right? Rather than just thinking, I've got this thing. And I've
got this very shame-worthy thing that I must hide from society at all costs.
So I've got two personal things about that. One which is super lame, but I'm going to touch on it anyway.
But it's not.
Yeah, and the other one which I think is actually kind of a big deal. The super lame one is I recently ran across the term phrasexual or phrasexual or something. I haven't even looked into
spelled like...
I don't know. I haven't looked into it. I just heard about it on a podcast a few days ago.
Huh.
And when I first heard it, I was like, oh my God, that's me. That's so nice to have a term for that. And then immediately afterwards, I was like, this sounds kind of like bullshit.
Wait, what is the definition of this?
Someone who loses interest in people over a period of year or two or some time.
Yeah, like the thing I worry about there is that it's the same thing with like demisexual, where the joke about that was, what you mean the way that everybody experiences sexuality.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
like, I think that it's important to have words for things sometimes.
I guess, but then I was like, this sounds kind of like bullshit, actually. I think I was just, having some kind of insecurities about something, and then this word came up, and I was like, oh, cool, a thing I can latch on to that, explains my experience and says, no, it's a total natural way of being. You're just like everyone else that has their own sexuality. And so that's why I didn't bother looking into it more after that, because I was like, I think I'm just fooling myself, and this is bullshit.
There's a related thing that I'll probably find opportunity to circle back to, but what was your second example? Or I can do my thing real quick.
Go ahead and do your thing real quick.
Yeah, so there's, with the idea of, like, the relationship between grief and depression. So are you textbook depressed if you just lost your job and...
Do you mean like situational versus clinical?
Yeah, but apparently there's, at least in the last few years, an emergence, and this might be in the new DSM, of what's called complicated grief. If you're sad for too long, that's a problem.
Right.
But, like, it's not clear to me what... And, I'm not a psychologist, maybe it's clearer to them, but, if you're going through a traumatic grief spell where something terrible happened, and, well, it's been 6 weeks and 1 day, you're now diagnosed with clinical, or with complicated grief. Like, that seems weird. Maybe it takes more than 6 weeks to completely get over the death of your companion or something, right?
Yeah.
So, like, I've always had mixed feelings about things like that, because...
My two best friends died in 2011, and I'm not over it.
And I think that...
And I don't think I'm ever going to be.
I think that
I talked to my dad when he was in his, 40s or 50s about grief at one point. One of the, rare empathetic conversations we had, and he told me, yeah, death fucks you up. Yeah. I lost friends when I was your age. I continue to lose friends who are just old or having heart attacks or whatever, and just, it hurts every time, and you never really get over it, and that's just sort of the way of it. And that kind of,
it stops being as raw, but it never goes away.
Maybe, the problem is if you just become non-functional because of it, and it's all you can think of.
Right.
I could see that being an actual disordered state.
And, I mean, that would be a disordered state 4 days in, if you're, laying in bed, shitting yourself and not eating. It's... So, to me, it was the specific time constraint on this. But yeah, I mean, and grief is one of those things where, when are you better? It's you don't, it never goes away. You just, you learn to carry it better, and it just becomes a thing that happened, right? And, it never goes away, because how could it? And maybe I'm not defining complicated grief well, but I just remember this because this was one of my wife's teachers at Columbia actually I don't know if coined the phrase is right, but I think was a big popularizer of it. And I guess what I'm getting at is that, like, there's a range of human experiences, not all of them great, that are perfectly normal. And I don't know if the line between, or I suspect that the line between normal and expected and unhealthy and you need special intervention is I think that's a not hard line, right?
Yeah.
And so I guess, so like Jace had like the worst examples of like bad doctors and bad environment of people ignoring your problems. Then you're like, can I get help? And they're like, fuck you, you don't have a problem, or just suck it up, which is like the worst thing that can happen. But you also don't want somebody, who goes in at 10 years old and they talk too much in school. It's like, oh, they've got ADD. They need to be on some chillax pills or focus pills or whatever. Like, or, somebody takes the death of a parent hard and they're also a kid. Oh, they need SSRIs. They need, chemical intervention drugs during their formative puberty brain years, during an experience that maybe they'd have gotten over and, or handled better in a couple of weeks. So I think there's a problem between overzealous and underzealousness. That was my really long way of making that point. Sorry.
Yeah. Piggybacking off of that, because it's basically the same thing. There was a post slightly after that Scott Alexander posted that pulled out like highlights from the comments on that review. I don't know. I've heard similar stuff. I also feel kind of hesitant to read this, but I'm going to go ahead. I know a woman who was sexually interfered with as a child. It didn't affect her when it happened. She was old enough to remember it, but the memories weren't painful. It was just a weird person doing stuff. She certainly didn't feel like she'd been victimized. Only later, when surrounded by friends who talked about how awful CSA is, I'm assuming that's child sexual assault, and how it ruins your life forever, etc., did trauma from the event hit her. This might not be a common experience, but it was unsettling to hear her describe that. She felt a degree of bitterness towards her friends, almost as if they'd caused her to become a victim, not her attacker.
No, I relate to that a lot. That's what Charlie and I were talking about.
Yeah.
With, like, if you... That's, again, like, it falls into this really complicated moral quandary zone, where if... I feel like I'm jumping all over the place because there's so much to talk about here.
You want to help the people who are traumatized and hurt by stuff as a child. But you also don't want to
victimize them, right?
Yeah, you don't want to victimize people or traumatize people who weren't traumatized
victimize
by
is
it.
the wrong word, but put them in the victim role.
Right, yeah.
Going sort of, I don't know. A thing that I've noticed is I think almost every like cis guy that I've dated has at one point casually mentioned a time where they were raped by a cis woman. And they wouldn't use those words. Like, they always, this one time I had a really bad fever, and then, like, this chick who was in my, like, dorm area came in and, like, sort of had sex with me, and I wasn't really that into it, and I was like, oh, man, that's a bummer. And that was kind of weird, like, just, like, when we're talking about past sexual experiences, and I'm just like, that sounds like rape. I think by definition you were raped. And they're like, what? No, men don't get raped by women. Like,
Well, I mean,
it seems like actually they do a lot. It's just that there's this cultural norm of, men are supposed to always be down for sex and want it. And...
Hey, you got laid. What are you complaining about?
Exactly, but like...
I was straight up told by a college professor that men can't get raped under the influence of alcohol. And
because you can't get it up, right? And if you don't have a hard dick, that means sex didn't happen.
Well, that was what it was. And I was at a stage, I think, where I'd been drunk once for science, like when I was like 17 at that point, because I wasn't a very interesting child. But I remembered even thinking, and I didn't have the cojones at the time to push back and be like, oh, this from your experience of growing up having a penis? Like, and having now been so drunk to where I couldn't safely take a shower and still able to maintain an erection. Like, I think that...
Also, whether or not you have an erection doesn't mean you can't be raped.
That's true.
Yeah.
But like...
Sex can't happen.
Yeah, but like
lots of times sex happens when the penis is... Or rape does happen when the penis is erect.
Yeah.
Also, mad flex.
Well, no, I mean, I like definitely drunk enough to where it's like I would never drive like this. Where like, if
or like
if my decision
I don't
making,
feel like I can make correct decisions in this stage.
My decision making is gone, and so I mean like that. So anyway, just having I was fem-splained that no, actually that can't happen. Your lived experience is wrong. But that's me just stoking the candles or the fires of culture war. But I didn't mean to distract from that. But other than to reinforce that yes, there's this norm that
that's another
men can't get raped by women.
Yeah, example of how cultural scripts affect the way you experience something, or even like this woman who experienced some like childhood sexual abuse didn't really feel like it was a big deal because it didn't she didn't know what the hell was going on at the time. It didn't really like physically harm her, I guess. Like, and I'm just saying this like, you know, out of empathy for like I sort of had the same thing going on. I just like there was some shit that happened to me as a kid that was kind of fucked up, and I was just like, yeah, that was weird. Like, I feel like this is about sex stuff, but I don't really understand that enough, and like that was something somebody did to me, and I'm not really gonna like be fucked up about it because I wasn't hurt. It didn't end badly, like whatever. And man,
Yeah.
but like, there's a part of me that wonders, like, am I not worried about this enough? Should I be more angry about it? I
Right.
would be super angry, you know. Like I said, I had these partners that told me about like casually times that they were raped where they weren't even able to use that word or think about it in those terms, and I was like, no, you super got taken advantage of there, and that's not okay. You shouldn't be cool about that. But also, I don't want you to like collapse in self-pity or
Right. It
It's
seems to be working okay for you right now.
yeah.
Kind of thing.
If you're saying like, I wonder if I should be more upset or more taken into this, my intuition is like, no. If you're doing okay, you know, leave that box where it is in your brain, right? But I'm not an expert. Maybe you should dig into it. My intuition suggests no, and it's a strong intuition. But
The primary reason to want them to get like more angry is because maybe then the perpetrator would be caught before they start doing worse things to more people.
yeah, I still have like the college professor that totally like when you're talking about getting drunk. The first time I ever got drunk was this guy giving me absinthe. I think I talked about that already, but like I drove up to like hang out at his mom's place, lol, in the mountains of Pennsylvania where I was just trapped, and then he was just like, "Oh, we'll do a tasting of different absinthes." And I'd never been drunk before, so I was like, "Cool, we can do an experiment where I can see what it's like in a safe environment to be drunk." And then I got I I drank 5 absinthes, which is an insane amount of alcohol for somebody who was completely naive to alcohol, but like at that point I was like, "Oh yeah, no, I'm starting to feel like I need to go lay down and like eat some salt and stuff." And then he just like came on to me, and I was just like, well, I'm trapped in the mountains here. I said no a few times and he wasn't listening, so I was just like, I guess
Yeah.
this may as well just happen.
I've heard a number of people having similar experiences.
And I like this guy might still be teaching.
Yeah.
He might be listening to this podcast. He's probably not listening to this podcast. If he is, fuck you.
you know,
Or like make better decisions.
that's where I am. I find there's a song in, I don't know if it's her newest album or second most newest, Kesha. I think the album is called Rainbow.
She's so good.
She's so good. The song is called Praying, and the whole album seems to be about her overcoming all the insane bullshit she went through. Bullshit's putting it too lightly. The abuse and manipulations and stuff. And the point of the Praying song is like, I hope you've, not that like you found peace, you know, with all the terrible shit you've done, that too, but I hope you're better. Like, and that's always what I want, you know. If this guy's out there, like, you know, and he may, you know, what I mean, he's probably still alive or whatever, but it's like, I don't want him dead or harmed. I want him better.
Yeah.
Like, I want him to be like, oh my god, I can't believe I did that, and I'm a better person now for having recognized that was the wrong place to be. But I wanted to mention before I forget, there's 2 podcast episodes we're going to put in the notes here for other shows. One is 180 of Sam Harris's podcast called Sex and Power, and it talks about just what you guys were talking about with that comment of like this woman went to like I forget what it was, like a group, a collection,
I
an
think it was
after,
just her friends.
huh?
The commenter who said that like all these things happen to me, but I don't feel fucked up about it. I think it was just her like her friends, right? Her friend group.
Yeah. But anyway, that's what Megan Dom, or Dome, I don't know how you say her last name, the interviewer or the guest on this episode, she attended some event like this on a college campus where everyone was like sharing their experiences, and there was like this pressure to like submit your own experience, and like you kind of get this like, oh, you suffered with us too kind of vibe. And you know, like
That's powerful. That's compelling.
Well, and it sucks because like you put it just eloquently yourself from your own lived experience. It's like, should I have more of a problem with this, or is it fine? Like, you know, if you squint through a 2020 definition of rape, I've been like that. I've been in that situation where I've had sex I didn't want to have, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Well, I mean,
Definitionally.
well, so, and as the victim in this case, I'm prepared to just say like, I've had sex I regretted that I didn't want to have at the time, but I wouldn't want to put that on even the same level of somebody who was attacked.
Yeah.
And so, and I get like they're related experiences, but like it was not traumatizing. It was like learning about it in the historical context, or in the new context of how the word is used. I'm like, oh, that happened to me, but I don't care.
I still characterize all of my times that shit happened as gray area because it was gray area. Like, me and the other person were drunk. I don't know. Like, even the college professor, who I think was a total dick and being manipulative, but, like, I don't think that he was, like, nobody thinks they're the villain of their own story. If I have to, like, psychoanalyze what was going on with him, it was that he thought that we were in love. And that, like, no means yes.
And he probably thought that he was giving you a really good time or something, that this was something that you guys would enjoy together.
He was really into the whole age difference dynamic, too, where, like, the, like, daddy, dom, little girl,
Oof.
DDLG, is that it?
I've never enjoyed
No,
that
that's super gross to
thing.
me, probably because I've been abused by situations like that. But, like, in his perspective, I don't know, that was, like, I don't think he thought that he was raping me or taking advantage of me in his heart of hearts. He thought that, like, it's like porn where they're like, oh no, daddy, don't do it like that. Where I was literally like, no, this is very uncomfortable, please.
You gotta like either establish that with someone beforehand. You basically always have to establish that with someone beforehand. You gotta like.
No, this was just completely like done badly. But like, I don't think. I think there's a difference between like literally, I'm gonna get this, like spike this chick's drink and then like bang her without her consent and like post it on Twitter versus like somebody who's just grossly misinformed and has also probably been raised with really toxic education about.
Christ.
And I'm realizing that like we're kind of getting.
No,
but
it's important, and if the people listening are as uncomfortable as I am, like that's I think valuable. This is a horrendous, we try to learn not to flinch away from scary dark thoughts, right? So
but
if we're looking into the darkness here, this is uncomfortable and it's supposed to be.
Get buy-in and consent with your partner beforehand, enthusiastically, and not when they're fucked up on something.
Yeah.
Consent is sexy. You heard it from us.
I mean, well, and then too, I mean, I'm fairly vanilla, but like if you want to set up this dynamic beforehand, non-consensual sex fantasies are not uncommon for people. I'm given to understand.
Consensual non-consent.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But so then, if you know that your partner's into that and they've expressed it to you, then you can just do like full thematic enactment to fulfill the fantasies of whatever in a way that would be monstrous if you just guessed, right?
Yeah.
There was a great Louis C.K. bit like that, but it's consent's sexy. Once you've had the conversation and everything's on the table, then hey, now we can do all these things that we wanted to do together, and now we don't have to feel awkward about it or wonder if it's okay or whatever, right?
I want to bring up an elephant in the room, but not until you have done your thing that you wanted to talk about.
This is just related, and we won't get, I think, much of a chance to get into it too much, so I'll just point at it, that episode 198 of Very Bad Wizards talked about Thomas Saz's book, The Myth of Mental Illness. It was 1961. And
I also
it is
don't know how to pronounce that last name, but I know what book you're talking about.
Szaszz, or Szaszz.
Zaz's in there.
Yeah.
Thomas Zaz.
So, anyway, he's basically taking the extreme view, like the opposite of like we're talking, like I keep talking about, like are people too over enthusiastically just prescribe or diagnosing things, or under enthusiastically? He's like, it's all over enthusiastic. Basically, mental illness is not a thing, and the Very Bad Wizards do a good job talking about that. So that's episode 198.
Good,
we'll
so
link
I don't
to it.
have to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was fun listening to them talk about it anyway, and they really steelman the guy's case. I think he makes a good steelman himself, but also I got the version of his argument from them. So
Yeah, I wanted to go back to actually, Steven, something you were talking about a bit ago with the idea that there's complex grief or unresolved grief syndrome, disorder, whatever. And I want to also pimp a thing. There's a book I love. It's actually a compilation of articles from the Dear Sugar advice column, and it's just a book called Dear Sugar. In particular, though, there was it was the advice column number 44, How to Get Unstuck. But I think in the book it was called My Baby Died.
Oh.
And someone wrote in, like, I just want to read this whole thing because it's so fucking good. But like, we can just link to it.
Okay.
But somebody wrote in saying, my baby died. It was this unplanned pregnancy, but it was this very loved and wanted child, and it didn't work out. The kid died. The woman who had the baby couldn't move on. I think her partner left her, and her friends are all just like, oh, it's been too long. You're too sad about this. You need to move on. And Sugar's response, I think, is just perfect, where it sort of gets to the whole, like, Steven being concerned about somebody pathologizing someone being sad for too long, where it's like, who's to say when it's too long or when you're too sad? I'll link the exact article here so people can read it, so I don't feel compelled to just read the entire thing word for word. But I think what we really need here is this acknowledgement of, because they talk about pathologizing things or normalizing things, or even going as far as to unstigmatize or re-stigmatize things. I think there should be this awareness of, this is human, this is normal, and also you still need help.
Yeah, that doesn't have to be
your
either
baby
or.
died, and that's basically what Sugar says is, fuck, your baby died. Fuck that. Fuck anybody who thinks that you're taking too long to get over it. They don't understand because their baby didn't die. Go seek help, but don't beat yourself up about being too sad for too long, or this holding you back. That's kind of, or that's exactly anti-helpful. What you need to hear is fuck, your baby died. That's terrible. Here's things you can do to help. But having to, it feels like there's just this false dichotomy, or not even a dichotomy, quadcotomy of saying that either, yes, you are this diagnosis and you get to play the victim card forever, and everyone needs to, excuse all of your behaviors and be very, very sad about the things that have happened to you, versus, a thing happened to you, you're too sensitive, just get over it. These aren't our choices, or they don't have to be our choices. We can be there are these incredibly common things that happen, whether it's mental illness, whether it's situational depression, grief, mania, whatever. Yeah. That humans have terrible things happen to them, and that causes them to have behavioral issues, and we need to be able to, I think, be that's a super normal human way to have responded. In fact, you can see the ways that in fact this was adaptive.
I really like the answer, that the initial answer of fuck, that's terrible.
Yeah.
And I'm told, and I've heard this a few times, that one of the most valuable things you can hear in a therapy setting is just fuck, that sucks.
Yeah.
And
oh my god.
Yeah. Because it's oh good, I thought it was bad myself. I'm glad to hear that you agree. And it just, and then you don't leave it at that if you're trying to help the person, but just to acknowledge Jesus, yeah, right. I that's vindicating from the person who experienced something bad, right? To have when you go to talk about it, just have the person you're talking with validate your own feeling about it, of didn't this suck? And fuck yeah, that sounds like it sucks. It
makes perfect sense for you to be fucked up about this. I would be fucked up about this if I were you. There's nothing pathological about the way that you're reacting to this. There are ways that we can do therapy, there are medications you can take, there's that's the thing. Here are the resources to help you move through this thing that's perfectly human and natural for you to be doing or feeling right now because of what happened. And yeah, I feel we're missing a lot of that culturally, where there still seems to be this really strong dichotomy of either the poor Wooby needs to be given a blanket and all the medications and nobody can criticize them ever for the rest of their life, and yeah, fuck that person. They're just being, self-pitying and trying to mooch off of a system where there's people with real mental disorders that those don't have to be our two choice.
Should I mention the thing?
I mean,
which thing?
So there was a thing I was thinking of the whole time when I read this post initially that was never brought up, that I was surprised about, and it was brought up in the comments. But the examples he gave were anorexia in Hong Kong, or the examples from the book were anorexia in Hong Kong, depression in Japan, PTSD in Sri Lanka, and schizophrenia in Zimbabwe, I think it was. And then he went to the conclusion, and I had been expecting the whole time for there to be some sort of section about what do they call it? Rapid onset gender dysphoria in the U.S., and it was never brought up. And then it...
You mean transgenders, Inash?
Right, transtrenders. And then it was brought up basically in a comment later on, but the...
Of course it was.
Yeah, where it sucks going through puberty, and it's awkward, and you don't like the changes that are happening, and from what it sounds like, a lot of people are being quickly diagnosed as trans when that's not necessarily the case, but I don't really know very much about it. But it seems like a current day topic where that could be the case with modern teenage girls. I don't know. Specifically girls for some reason, which I find weird. I don't know why guys wouldn't also get that.
So it's bad to be a girl and it's good to be a guy. So if a girl wants to be a guy, that's natural because obviously you'd want to be a guy. But if a guy wants to be a girl, that means that they have psychological issues.
Okay.
I'm being somewhat sarcastic and flippant here, but actually, like, going back to the whole J.K. Rowling hating, like, gender inclusive bathrooms and transphobia bullshit. Like,
not even like the gender inclusive bathrooms, just like in general.
Well, it's a common track in transphobia where transphobes think that trans women are really just men dressing as women in order to try to invade women's spaces so they can peep on the hot bathroom shit. And trans guys are just deluded, poor, sad girls that don't like that were lied to and have no agency of their own, and they're being told by the culture, the media, that like because they don't feel like being a girl that like it's very infantilizing, and I get irritated about it.
It sounds
from
irritating.
both sides.
I endorse your irritation.
Yeah, no, I agree, and that would be fucking annoying. Is there no similar? The trends seem similar where suddenly something becomes very popular and reported on, and then there is a huge explosion in the number of people who have this affliction.
I remember like having an argument with my grandmother before I even identified as autistic about the autism epidemic, where from my perspective and what I said, like when I was just getting used to ever challenging my grandmother, story for another time, but well, I don't know, like there's all these people that are saying their kid has autism now because it's popular and everybody's like, and I was just like, okay, or maybe just like people know that there's a word for this thing now.
No.
And everybody is coming forth being like, oh, thank God somebody has identified what this thing is, and maybe my kid has it. You should look at this. And I sort of fail to see how it's worse if people are overdiagnosing than underdiagnosing.
I'm not sure about in the case of autism. I think it's true that a lot of people would have simply been called, nerdy or geeky or something and gone into an engineering career, and they would have been autistic their whole life without really getting a diagnosis. But
that could be like a whole other topic.
I think what you're getting at is that if there was a surgery to correct autism,
right,
and there was then suddenly a booming number of diagnoses, there might be a concern that some people who didn't need surgery got surgery.
Right.
And like I don't have strong thoughts on like if the current like upward trend in numbers of diagnoses of gender dysphoria is analogous to what was the wanalexic or wanorexic instead of anorexic.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's analogous to that or if it's like Jace said with autism, like it's like, oh, there's a label for this thing that I've been feeling forever.
I came out as trans at like 32 or 33 because like it took that long for me to be able to admit that something's been wrong my whole life, and that like I don't just need to tough it out or just deal with it.
Yeah, I think that
but that's my anecdote,
Yeah, no, I think that it's whatever way it is, if it's again, anorexia is so dismissive, but it was in the article and it works to make the point. If it's like that, or if it's hey, look, I finally got a societally acceptable label to identify what's been on my mind for the last while. Either way, the trend is like the graph would look the same. So that point is taken. I don't know which explanation, or maybe it's some combination of both, would explain it.
Most things are usually both.
Yeah.
If being both is an option, it's probably both.
Most things aren't one thing. Yeah.
Can I, in the interest of our last episode, the Do This directives, I want to just put forth a strong opinion about this that maybe I don't even necessarily endorse, but it'll be a good talking point. So, I think that the harm that is done by denying treatment and pathologizing or stigmatizing mental illness is far worse than if you just give everybody the treatment and allow them to have the diagnosis. Like, what harm is done? So say, autism, the main, interventions there are different kinds of therapy. Maybe like special schools. So like, you think your kid might have autism. You take them to a behaviorist who says they sure do seem to have a bunch of autistic traits. You put them in some kind of therapy. And then like 3 years later, it's like, no, it seems like actually they have more problem with ADD. So you pull them out of that and you put them in the ADD track. Or like, actually, no, it seems like they were just going through a different development period than other kids, and they're fine, so they can leave the autism program. What harm was done?
I don't think there's any harm in those cases, but if thousands of people develop anorexia, that is harmful to your body. The PTSD example
if they
pulled out
develop it, but like if they're also seeking treatment.
The specific thing that is brought up in the book is that this causes people to develop anorexia by making it, glamorous and widely known. And the PTSD thing is similar. Like,
do you think
PTSD
that kind of person
are,
wouldn't have developed something else, though, that there wasn't that, like, underlying stress there that needed to come out in some form?
I do think that, actually. Like, the PTSD thing
do you think, like,
specifically...
a normal, healthy, happy person would, like, oh, for social status reasons, I'm going to identify as transgender and deal with all of the social stigma, being, like, rejected by my family and friends, having to do a second puberty, go through hormones, do surgeries, etc., and, like...
I absolutely do not think that, in the same way that I don't think that anyone goes blind just because they're like, oh, I'm depressed, I'm hysterical, I'm blind now, oh, I can't see things. Like,
my uterus is moving through my body rapidly.
Right. I think they
it's in my eyes, I can't see.
I think they actually do go blind, and I think that people who come back from Iraq actually do develop PTSD, and it's bad. But I think if it was possibly referred to in different ways, then this wouldn't happen as much. Like, that's literally the question, is making these things more popular and widely known actually causing people to get them at a higher rate, and thus is a bad thing. I don't think anybody would want to do, like you were saying about the trans stuff.
Where I wonder, like, sort of where I'm leaning, and again, this is just me doing the do this directives and having an opinion, like, where maybe I shouldn't, but, like, at least it gives us something interesting to talk about. I think that, yes, higher awareness of these things probably does cause more people to be like, oh shit, maybe that's the thing I have. Or even, worst case scenario, wow, wouldn't it be cool if I went on my Instagram and said that I had this thing and then I got all kinds of attention?
I think that's very
is it
rare.
Bad?
Well, I mean, it depends. Again, if you
is this taking resources away from people who really need it? Like, I think largely no.
It might, probably unlikely. I mean, the greater damage is to yourself, but again, it's your body. You can damage it all you want if you want to, and if you regret that later, I mean, that sucks. But hopefully, society in general will learn.
The transgender thing, where, like, people are so concerned about what other people are doing to their bodies, and I feel like just let people do what they want to do with their own bodies, and if they make a mistake, it's on them.
Yeah. No, I mean, I agree. People can do whatever they want with their bodies, but, it also sucks if someone ends up kind of mutilating their body. The thing about the trending debate right now is that there's almost no gatekeeping at all. Like, anyone says, hey, I think I'm trans.
Almost no gatekeeping?
That is...
Are you sure?
Okay, so
There was so much gatekeeping in it.
I don't know. I've never gone through it myself. It sounds like it depends on where you live and what your social class is. Some people are being simply given whatever they ask for without anyone even asking them, are you sure about it or whatever.
I really like the strong opinion version of the Bayesian conspiracy. This is fun.
This is fucking terrifying. I don't like it.
I can stop.
No. It's cool. It's cool.
I worry how much we're also just sort of sycophants most of the time.
I don't think that we are going to have any issues with each other because we all know each other and we're friends. I'm more worried about the knock-on effects with future whatever, but I guess I don't need to be employed anymore, so whatever.
Well, I think that what you're saying, like, there is a trend that's horrifyingly parallel to, like, the repressed memories from the 1980s.
Yeah.
And have you considered that really the problem is that you're a girl inside or you're a boy inside? Well,
whereas before it was like, were you raped as a child? Well, right. I don't remember being so. Well, but let me put you under hypnosis, and maybe you were.
Yeah, and someone asks, what's the harm? Well, the harm is the family being torn apart.
Well, and, in the case of this repressed memory thing, but what surprised and shocked me to learn was that some of these, psychiatrists, and it's obviously got to be a small minority of them, but some of the very same people from the 80s who are giving people repressed memory diagnoses are the ones pushing, like, maybe you've got this problem diagnoses now. And it's like, how are you still licensed? And how is your reputation not just destroyed by now?
So, I just can't imagine going through life never having an orgasm once. Like, that would be awful, and I don't...
Wait, what is that in relation to?
It can be a side effect of puberty blockers if they're taken for a while.
Maybe.
And, like, that, I mean, sure, that's people's decision to make, but oh my god, that would be... I would want them to have a lot of informed consent before they jumped on that.
I feel like when people want puberty blockers, it's because, I don't know, like, growing up, I had a friend group of kids that, like, grew up on the same block or few blocks as me, and there was one kid that was just clearly a trans guy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's weird because I wasn't or didn't. I had my issues with gender, but they seemed like, I have complicated issues with gender, and it was...
Yeah.
The thing is, like, neither of us knew that being trans was an option at the time, but this other kid just was like, cut their hair short, wore only boy clothes, like was assigned female, and she was like, nope, I'm just gonna be a dude. I'm gonna behave like a dude. I'm gonna take the like dude. Like we would like
That's cool.
literally grew up as children. We were playing house, and this kid was always like, I'm the brother,
Yeah.
or like, whereas I was the dog. And so I think that's an interesting sort of comparison of two different ways of being trans, where like I think I was like, I didn't experience a lot of gender dysphoria. I experienced a lot of gender just dissociation, where I just didn't deal with or think about. Like when I was going through puberty, I was just like, oh, I know the facts of this. Okay, cool, whatever. So I'm just never going to like deal with it. And this other person just felt much stronger about it. And
So, I mean, this is something I'm pulling out of the comments again, and I'm gonna use myself as an example here, which feels weird, but on the Discord, on the Bayesian Conspiracy Discord, which I spend some time on, there's sort of a running joke which comes up every now and then that I am an egg, which I personally disagree with. But like, people are like, but all these signs and symptoms, like these things, you are an egg, and you are still,
you do spend a lot of time in blog posts talking about how maleness is terrible and you hate being a man, and
that's one of the pieces of evidence people point to. Yes.
Is egg referring to something?
An egg is someone who is trans but doesn't know it or won't acknowledge it.
Okay.
And I mean, part of the definition is they don't know it or won't acknowledge it. So obviously, I couldn't say no, I'm not, but I do say no, I'm not. But from the thing it says in the comments that I pulled out here, someone said, in a traditional society, Alice would be a cis woman who occasionally has the weird feeling that she's not really female, but dismisses this as obviously ridiculous and never thinks about it again. But in our society, where her gender and the possibility that it might be wrong is constantly called to her attention and reified, this turns into full-blown gender dysphoria. And like, I think that's the same thing. We're like, yeah, I have a lot of complicated, fucked up things with gender sometimes, but for the most part, I've come to my peace with it, because during my most
feels more cis by default to me.
Well, sure, but during my most psychologically malleable periods, I came to peace with like, you know what? Sure, this kind of sucks, but this is the body I'm in, and there we go. And like,
see, I thought that I had
that's
reached
why I
that
think
point
we're
too for quite a long time. Until
yeah, but I think that's
realized
where
that,
these.
oh, actually, there's this other option that I just didn't know about or wasn't able to look at.
But I think that's where the whole society can influence how much something happens comes into play. Where
oh, definitely.
Yeah, where like, that would create more trans people, or that would create more PTSD people, or that would create more anorexic people, and like, it's not that they're pretending or acting out or anything. It's just that the social ocean that you're awash in, like, actually affects your development.
Like, there are these underlying pressures, but the way that you choose to bring them out, talk about them, deal with them or not is sort of guided by what your society tells you is and isn't appropriate.
Yeah, I hung out with a lot of tomboys, and like, the thing about it was like, sure, again, tomboys often have complicated gender things, but like, whatever, I'm a woman, you can't take that away from me, because that's what I was born as, and I can act as boyish and manly as I want, because it doesn't change anything about me. And it was like a point of strength,
As a kid, I used to cut my hair short and only wear boy clothes and do sports and collect lizards and whatnot. And then also I would get really mad whenever anyone mistook me for a boy.
Okay.
But in retrospect, that was hilarious, because I was like, I was completely presenting as a boy. Why wouldn't? I don't know. But like,
yeah.
So part of what kept me from coming out as trans for such a long time was this is the body that I'm in, and like, also being involved in feminism and, a lot of formative experiences being, girls aren't allowed to play with dinosaurs. That's not a girl toy. That's a boy toy. You can't do that. You're not allowed to. And it's just like, sort of wanting to scream and punch them all and be like, fuck you, I'm a girl.
Yeah, right.
Was it
exactly.
on Freitas? I forget. I think it was Freitas, but there was this like Viking warrior woman who used to charge into battle topless in order to show, I'm a woman and I'm gonna fuck your shit up. And
nice.
I sort of found that out later, but I was just like, that.
Yeah.
But also like, then later I was like, oh, maybe I wasn't a woman. But like, just the fact that people were saying that women can't do these things, and I felt like I belonged to that class, or that it was talking about other people that I hung out with and liked and cared about, made me so fucking mad. That was part of what held me back from being able to like express my true, scare quotes, gender.
But that's the thing. I don't think that it's a worse existence to be the sort of, boyish woman or sort of guy with complicated feelings about things than it is to be a trans
man with
person.
Feelings.
Right.
What?
Yeah. It's inappropriate in our society. But I don't think that's a worse existence than being trans and going through all the shit that comes with that. And I think it's extremely important to help people and acknowledge people who have the gender dysphoria so deeply ingrained that that is the best thing for them. But there's a line where people could fall one way or the other, and I don't think necessarily pushing them into the transitioning thing is the best thing for them or society, kind of like with anorexia and PTSD and those things.
To go back a bit on the having strong opinions, I noticed that you also pulled out lesbian extinction.
I didn't pull that out. That was a thing that also came to mind, so I made the note, and I wasn't actually going to bring it up.
Really relevant, where when you look at historical people, I think this is super interesting. So you would see Queen Hatshepsut, the pharaoh queen who would present as a man and wore a fake beard and everything. They were same deal with female pirates, female soldiers, etc. throughout history, that you could say, okay, these were these weird aberrants, or these were clearly butch lesbians or tomboys, or more recently now people can say these seem to be trans men. Mm-hmm. But they presented the way that they were, or they did what made sense to them at the time. And I think that the lesbian extinction thing is really interesting because there is, I think, now so much concern for acknowledgement of being transgender being an option, that it sort of overrides the other options. And I do see that, where it's just for example, there's this butch lesbian Tumblr that I love, or a few of them, but one in particular I'm thinking of, where I was really confused scrolling around being on there by seeing women who identified as butch lesbians taking tea, growing facial hair, getting chest surgery, and I was just wait a minute. But they're still but this doesn't not make me a woman. I just want to present more mask. And I'm okay.
Yeah.
Shrugging off into the distance of the void. Gender is weird and complicated, and I do sort of worry that there is this sort of desire to kind of not minimalize it, but compartmentalize it and name all these things, and then your options are A or B. So I can get on board with that.
I'm ready to weigh in.
Do it.
All right. So I think zooming out a bit, there's a huge important distinction that just we need to make sure that is illuminated and not ignored, that treating we talked about a bit, but I just want to emphasize the point. If someone's misdiagnosed with autism, they get some extra therapy. Hey, that sounds like a perk.
And they probably could have used it anyway, because they've probably got something going on.
I feel like everybody could use some extra therapy.
Seriously.
I'm sincere about that. And so just everyone could use some physical
therapy. Being human
is
hard.
Huh?
Being human is really goddamn hard.
I equate
physically
psychotherapy with physical therapy.
Yeah.
You might feel great, but hey, you might feel even better if you did these stretches or these particular exercises. You might not even know that your knee isn't supposed to feel that way or something, right? So,
or even just the healthiest, most stable person probably has some shit that they could work through with the therapist.
Yeah.
Everybody's got shit.
Totally.
Being human is hard.
Yeah. I like that summary is apt. But there's a difference between that and then being misdiagnosed something where the treatment is surgery that is irreversible, and so because there's actual stakes, right? In one case you get some extra therapy that maybe wasted 3 hours a week that you could have spent playing games or something, but you had to do therapy instead or whatever, but that time isn't the worst thing in the world to lose. But if the treatment for whatever you're misdiagnosed with is the amputation of your legs, just to go straight to the level of absurdity, then now you look back and well, shit, maybe I didn't want to lose my legs, and now I miss having them. So I'm not an expert on anything with the difficulties with identifying or figuring out whether or not you're trans or something, but I'm just pointing out that there's a difference in the stakes of a misstep, because you're what's the harm? And the harm could be well, a fuck up here made me get some extra therapy and I'm a better adjusted 19-year-old than I would have otherwise been. And the other one is
versus I was on the wrong medication for 10 years, or I got surgeries that weren't necessary, more possibly harmful. Yeah.
Right. I now looking back, I wish I had a dick, and I'm not sure how often that happens, but I'm sure it's more than never.
It is more than never.
Yeah.
I remember actually being quite irritated by some articles I read about detransitioners. I think that they, in particular, the conservative right really tries to push these stories, or just people that are transphobes, of people that transitioned and then regretted it and detransitioned. In particular, I remember reading this story that really irritated me, where there was this guy who was having dysphoria, and then like all of his friends apparently convinced him that he was a trans woman and needed to come out as trans and get the surgeries and do the hormones, and then later it's like, no, they were wrong, and how dare Planned Parenthood or whoever like just give me hormones without asking. And but like the thing that I was irritated about was you were the one coming and saying, I identify this way, I would like these procedures, please. Like in that case, I think that it sucks that that happened, but also that person needs to own their own choices and not say, oh, my friends convinced me into it, and Planned Parenthood just gave me the hormones without asking. I was just like, this feels like the whole like drugs thing again.
No one snuck up and stabbed you with hormones. Yeah,
like it's shitty of this person. Assuming this is what actually happened, it is shitty of this person's friends to have pushed that diagnosis on them if they weren't sure. But it seems like honest mistake to have made. I don't know what this person was going through or what was wrong with them, but it seems like if they were fucked up enough about their identity and presentation that they like were like, oh yeah, I need to go on hormones, start presenting female, dressing female, changing my pronouns, changing my name, going and getting really invasive, expensive long-term surgeries, and then later regretted it, that's kind of on them.
Do you listen to Blocked and Reported at all?
No, I don't know what that is.
There's a podcast called Blocked and Reported. It's two quite liberal people. One of them wrote, both journalists, one of them wrote an article about detransitioning and as a result, was canceled, lost his career, etc. Does the
That's such garbage,
podcast
by the way.
now. Yeah. And so, I
hate that there has to be this sort of,
Yeah, no, I agree with you totally about the detransitioner made a bad choice and that was on them. Like, they didn't force anybody to do this to them.
I'm sure the media didn't convince them.
Yeah, they made, they said yes and please do this every step along the way. But also, it's harder to make an informed decision if you don't know that, what all the potential problems are and what other people who have gone through this say about it. So, while I don't think anyone should be pushing a detransition narrative like, oh, this is a big thing, also censoring anyone who mentions anything about detransitioning is bad, because then no one would know that, oh, this is a potential thing that could happen. Informed consent means you have to be informed. And if one side is completely censoring the detransitioning does exist side of things, then you can't be fully informed because you never find that out.
Yeah, if the other side is pushing, this is always what happens.
Yeah.
Then you are scared to transition because obviously you're, everybody who's ever done this made a mistake and regrets it and is horribly deformed now.
So, as always, I come out in favor of freedom of speech and don't cancel anyone.
There's reducto absurdums on both sides. So this ties into the other two quick points I wanted to make. One, the other, and I don't want to get into it too long unless you guys find it really captivating, but the other complicating factor here about informed consent and the decision making is if you're making a decision as a parent for your 10-year-old that, you know what, you seem like you need antidepressants and the risk is minimal, let's try them out. If the parent for the 10-year-old says, you know what, it seems like you need transgender surgery, the kid could say, sure, I want it, but I'm going to say kids don't know what the hell they're talking about. But that
my childhood friend knew.
And that's
as
a good
depends on the kid.
Yeah, that's all right. So that's fair. I just think as far as
I think if a kid has strong feelings about it, you should at least take it seriously.
Of course.
Sorry if I'm jumping in and cutting you off. You should finish your thought.
I'm not saying we should never. I'm not saying ignore them. I'm just saying that it's one thing for an adult person to go say I want this surgery. It's another thing entirely for someone else to say I think you want this and I have medical power over you. Of course you don't do it while they're saying please don't, but they might not be articulate enough to really explain where they're coming from. But yeah, obviously that you don't take it to the other absurd extreme and just ignore them. But I'm gonna do a strong opinion thing, and unless this egg joke is done in good-natured
it is
joke. Okay, good.
Yeah,
because I'm gonna be pissed because
no, it's all people that I know and love on the Discord.
Okay, I was gonna say you don't run around giving people even semi-jokingly tell them that they're psychologically hampered in a way that they're in denial about. That's a mean thing to do unless you're being friendly.
I mean, it's mostly joking. It's kind of a haha only serious kind of joking, but I get where they're coming from.
I do have to say
I've
made
offended.
this joke before.
The what?
I've also made this joke before.
Okay.
Just because of how often there was an episode a while ago where we were talking about transhumanism where both you and Steven were if you could change your bodies, and you both were oh, I'd be a woman immediately.
Well, So, okay, this is weird. I thought that the very first thing any guy in the world would do would be like, I'm going to be in a woman body and see what it's like to have sex with a woman. It's going to be awesome. Turns out that is not what every
I tried to tell you
guy
this.
says,
There's
which is
a
weird.
lot of cis people that actually really like relate strongly to their like I was actually surprised to find this out too, because it turns out
bizarre.
that because of bubble effects, most of my life I've been hanging out with other trans or like gender weird people. But I went and tried to talk to people that like identified as a cisgender whatever and asked them about it, and they were just like, oh no, I totally feel like a guy. No, I like having a dick. I like women and like the things that I don't know, like this has never been in question. I feel really strongly about this. What? And
I mean, I'm certainly not
this
against my
actually
dick.
seems to be the this seems to be the norm among cisgender people, and it was just like, oh, okay, because like most of my life I've been hanging out with people who are cis by default or trans in some way, and it's
But I
like
even think most cisgender dudes would jump at the chance, like, just be a chick and screw as a chick for a while.
maybe, but maybe not. Like, I think also maybe they think they might want that, but like, I forget where I heard this. It was just recent too, but somebody brought up that like some trans person mentioned that like it's sort of like imagine you wake up and you're in the body of a gorilla. And it feels that wrong.
Okay.
Like, and like you're not ever unaware of the fact that you're in the wrong body, and it's
Yeah, I don't experience dysphoria. I experience excitement at the idea of being able to try out different meat suits,
Yeah.
right? So
well, on Mind Killers, April also brought up there's also gender euphoria, the excitement you have of being in the right body, or like.
who's the lucky son of a bitch who gets that?
I get that.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I'm
I
stoked
didn't
for you.
have very much like the thing between me and my childhood friend who like the one friend was just like, nope, I'm a dude, like from babyhood, like as soon as they developed a sense of self onward, we're just like, I'm in the wrong body, I'm a dude, I need to do the dude gender role stuff, I need a dude name, I need a dude, like this is just obvious to everyone, and like, or it should be, it's obvious to me. And then like then there was me where I was just sort of always struggling with gender, but I didn't have a thing to call it or know what to do with it or anything. And but like it wasn't really dysphoria so much that pushed me over the edge of transitioning, but more of like, let me try this out. Oh my god, this feels so much better.
So I kind of see why Scott didn't include this now, because
It's
we got way off on this
a bit
on
mind
this
killy.
thing. Yeah, definitely mind killy. So I probably I should praise his discretion. I guess the overall bigger point was again is popularizing and raising awareness of certain things. At what point does it get to be more harm than good? Like in the cases of the anorexia and PTSD stuff.
Well, and he was reviewing a book, and if it wasn't in the book, then
That's true too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the point of the book was something slightly different about like the West is exporting its specific terminology, pathology, treatment, etc.
Yeah.
And sure, maybe, and something else about like the diminishing neurodiversity of the world there. But like the thing Scott thought was interesting was this question, and that's the thing I think is interesting and why I wanted to talk about it.
I like the. I mean, so just to kind of put my last pin on the last few minutes of what we're talking about, I imagine we'll zoom out in a couple of centuries and look back and be like, oh yeah, that was the confusing period where they were still figuring that stuff out. Like,
I hope so.
I mean, well, I think I'm optimistic. I mean, a couple centuries is a long time.
Yeah.
And if it'll be weird that like, oh yeah, people made like a whole fuss about whether or not someone thought they were a boy or a girl, and those are such like weird concepts now that or I feel the same way about like race or
Yeah.
other. I'm serious though.
No,
like,
I mean, if you think
I'm,
from the perspective of either a far future human or an alien, that's just like, oh my god, these people have like wars and shit about like being slightly different shades of brown or tan.
yeah, and to me, it's
have spiral nipples.
right.
What?
Like Rick and
Rick and
Morty.
Morty.
Yeah, I mean, the race thing, I remember I got, like, I raised an eyebrow when I was talking about that with somebody recently, and I was like, no, for real, though. Like, I'm told that race is largely a social construct, and, like, if you feel like you really close identify with one thing that you weren't born into, like, I don't think, in the future where everyone's more dude, I don't think anyone's going to say, no, you can't do that. If everyone's, if things are chill, then I think people are going to be more relaxed about stuff.
I'm just
But maybe
gonna
that's...
abide.
Huh? Yeah, people will just abide. All right, so I wanted to touch on PTSD before we wrap this up, because this is one that I have some sneaking suspicion might actually be overdiagnosed, or maybe just the umbrella of what it encompasses is more appropriately expanded now to include more things.
Because I feel like it's very underdiagnosed.
Oh man, this is so cool. We so rarely disagree that this is exciting. And so like, and then I had just a couple of like quick anecdotes from my past. So, I've been in one or two car crashes, which didn't deter me. I fell off of a horse that we were going kind of fast on once.
But you got right back on.
Well, I did, and it wasn't until I was telling the story and I used those words that I realized how cliched it was. And so, like, those didn't register. I had someone pull a gun in my face and do the, like I could hear a bullet in the chamber. And, I shook on the drive home, but slept fine that night. And it just is a thing that happened. These things might have traumatized some people, but didn't traumatize me. Conversely, the death of my cat in like 2016 fucked me up for years.
I do remember you talking to me about this cat.
And we've just passed about a year and a half with our current princess Zelda. That's her actual name. That was her name at the shelter, was Zelda. So it worked. It was part of what made us
Probably more
vibe so
Scott
well.
Fitzgerald Zelda, but
Well, not to us.
yeah.
But I mean, it took us years to get over our first cat. So like that, luckily I've lived a fairly sheltered existence, and that was like among the worst things that's happened. But
I still have nightmares about childhood pet deaths.
And so but isn't that, so this is,
But not about like childhood rapes. Like not about really stuff that happened to me, but times where I felt like I was responsible for this person or this thing, and I fucked it up, and so
dreams can be dicks, but
dreams, yes,
yeah,
dreams.
I sometimes have fun dreams. Sometimes I have I have magic powers, but but isn't that to me just is part of the like confusing issue, right? So like if I were to list off like these 5 things, people would be, I gave like, hey, what's a guess of what was traumatic in my experience? They might think, oh, like gun one might be near the top of the list, but honestly, it's probably near the bottom. I mean, the horse thing, I'm unlikely to encounter a horse unexpectedly. And that was not the horse's fault, it was the saddle.
I was gonna say, also, horses are great.
Yeah, I mean, the saddle was coming loose on it. It wasn't like it flipped out and kicked me off or something.
Oh, I've been bucked off horses.
Yeah, so I mean, that would be more, I think that'd be scarier. But point is like, I don't know, this is where I'm having the hardest, like, time, well, A, I guess apparently articulating my point, but B, with someone else saying, here's your problem. I've heard your experience. I'm going to give you a diagnosis, because someone might be inclined to diagnose, suppressed PTSD if, someone was, if since I was threatened with, a violent gun death, right? But, like, I don't feel like I have suppressed PTSD. Like, and I feel like my experience is probably enough, right?
You have mentioned numerous times that you don't have very good memories of your childhood, and specifically that, like, you don't feel like you were a person up until a certain age, and that worries me a bit.
For what it's worth, I have good corroborating, people from my childhood that can pretty much assure me that nothing really that bad happened.
I've never had much memory from my childhood either.
Yeah, I think it was, I have a general impression that things were great. Like, I don't have suppressed memories of it. It was just that, like, I think really what happened, just to quickly, hopefully put to rest any concerns that I'm suppressing childhood trauma, when I was in my late teens, I learned of the research of Elizabeth Loftus and saw her at a conference give a talk. The same conference where I got to meet James Randi, and because it was the amazing meeting, James the Amazing Randi, and some of those big skeptic folks. And then it was really just like, it was like the Lost in the Mall experiment. You can Google Lost in the Mall, Elizabeth Loftus, spelled like it sounds. And I was like, okay, this is kind of startling. It's really easy to like make up memories. I have very distinct memories of like watching the World Trade Centers get hit on TV, and I can't remember what. I remember like checking the veracity of the memories by Googling what time it actually happened, and without doing that again, I think I remember learning that my memory that I was pretty sure happened didn't actually happen, and I was like, okay, let's just go ahead and put everything that I'm not really sure about into this just like bucket called maybe in my brain. And eventually that bucket got garbage collected, and everything in there was just thrown out as possibly made up, and therefore like not retained. So I don't think I threw out traumatic stuff. It was just like I lost confidence in my ability to remember stuff, and therefore stopped trying, I guess. I think that's what happened there. But I guess I brought all this up because PTSD is one of those things where like I think the range of experience, maybe it's one of those things where like we need more granular terms, because there seems to be something.
We have some.
Yeah, I think it's getting better.
CPTSD.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, and this isn't me being farcical, there should be something called post-traumatic stress disorder, where it's Huh? Yeah, I mean, because like, all right, the trauma hasn't happened yet. You know it's going to, and that's freaking you out, right? So like, that's also traumatic in itself. But anyway, I had a conversation once with like a guy who worked at a gas station. Did I tell this on this podcast?
I don't remember it so far.
It was so I was like, I must have been in late high school or college because it was the gas station next to my pizzeria where I worked, and it was raining, and I don't know why I was talking, enough about to get into this about him, but it was I think the end of his shift, and he was hanging out to like ring me up or something. I was like, oh, you're waiting for a ride or whatever, and he's like, no, I don't drive in the rain. I'm like, oh, eyesight something? He's like, no, when I was in Iraq, it watched IEDs explode, and it's the puddles when the car wheels go over them just freak me out, and that's so I'm at the stage I don't drive it when it's raining. And he was just like super chill about it. He clearly had trauma that was his coping mechanism with it, and the way that he described it made it seem like he was doing this, guided with a professional helping, because that was just like the most like blasé delivery of his understanding of where he was at. But like you compare that with I lost my cat, or people get PTSD from like bullies at school, which can be really traumatizing. And so I don't want to say like any of these things are worse or better than others. Like, if I had to pick, I'd rather lose another cat than get traumatized in Iraq. But that's not really that's not really what's at question here. I guess what I'm saying is that these sound like different kinds of things, right? Or maybe they're all the same and it just covers a wide range of experience that varies from person to person, therefore making diagnosis like really hard.
I think both.
See, that's the whole thing is it's more than one thing, and it's a fuzzy line. So
it's super complicated.
Yeah.
Hence complex PTSD.
And like the harking back to the beginning of this, the idea that there is a lot of mental stress or strain or something, and that is fucking people up, and it looks for an outlet, and your cultural environment is what determines what that outlet is, but that doesn't mean that the mental stress was fake.
Yeah, this actually brings to mind the point that I had when I was reading this, and I forgot to mention the entire episode, which is that like on the one hand, having a label like PTSD for like I went through this, whether it was a long thing, whatever, got rough job or a rough year at school or whatever, and I feel pretty fucked up about it, and man, this is intense, and I'm still trying to cope with this and shake it off. What's going on? Someone can give you a label like, it sounds like a post-traumatic stress disorder, and you're like, oh,
yeah. There are
well, geez, that helps.
Though.
Oh, I know, yeah, but it could fit, right?
I guess if you have flashbacks, panic attacks, like if you fit the criteria.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And then again, like maybe the criteria is also bullshit, but
well, so the specifics of PTSD aside, I guess just the idea of having a label of saying, hey, look, it sounds like it's this thing, whatever you're describing, whatever problem you're having. For some people, I think having a label can be a relief, and they're like, "Oh, good. I feel this way not because I'm broken, because I got this thing. I can deal with that, and then I now we've got a vector of attack to work on this." And other people will like take that and be like, "I'm damaged. I get to either give myself a get out of jail free card forever because I'm damaged, and I get to like just give myself a pass forever, or get the benefit quote unquote of the societal support of being damaged." But it seems like getting a label can be both like super helpful for some people and maybe not super helpful for others.
I think it's more like, I'm damaged. Now I have to deal with this. This is going to impact everything in my life. And then from then on, it starts impacting everything in your life because you think of yourself as damaged.
Yeah, that's another.
That's
thank you.
Sort of more like cultural lenses where like, I don't know if it would have been at all helpful for me to actually get diagnoses as a kid because, just growing up in a family that didn't believe or that believed that mental health was really just weakness of will. That would have been like another sort of mark against me. Like, I don't know. When I was thinking about when I had trichotillomania, it would have been, or I remember it actually being this like massive relief when I found out that it had a name and that other people had it. And that's like the main thing that I think a lot of people are like, oh, other people have this thing. There's a word for it. Like, I'm not just a freak.
I'm nodding enthusiastically when you were saying that, but that didn't come through on the air. Yeah, no, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Knowing that, like, oh, I'm not weird. I have a thing that other people have.
Right. I'm weird in a particular way that other people have.
Yeah. Right. I'm not uniquely weird. Right. Like, I mean, there's I can't remember. Once in a while, there's like an Ask Reddit thread. Does anyone else have this thing? And they're like, holy shit, yeah. Oh, I thought it was just me. Yeah. Like those are kind of just it's nice to like, it can just even take a huge edge off a lot of people. Be like, oh, I'm not alone in this. like I thought it was just me having this unique problem, and that I had, these terrible, weird things I uniquely had to overcome. But when you learn that, no, actually, this is a thing we understand. Check this out. You can do 5 easy
There's
steps.
the Reddit community for it.
Right. All right. Well, I didn't have much else to offer there on that. I guess I just wanted to pitch out the idea. Oh, and I'm going to put in the show notes, just because it's funny for some comedic relief, because some of this episode is heavy. George Carlin had a bit in the 90s on euphemisms, and he talks about PTSD as one of the euphemisms he covers.
Okay.
I put it in the notes already.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Alrighty. I guess, I have one thing at the very end to end it with, but did you want to say anything, touch anything else?
Nah, go for it.
This came from the comments section. It's how Scott Alexander ended the comments post, so I guess I'm going to quote it as well. He ended it with a user saying, "I found the trauma section of the book very compelling, in part because it squares with my impression of the United States as a society that is convinced it understands trauma better than any previous society, but seems to achieve uniquely poor outcomes. It would be like a land that was convinced it had the best vaccine for polio, but you look around and every fourth person is in an iron lung."
Yeah, I have so much to say about that, but I don't want to belabor it too long. I guess
If you wanna.
one of the things that is funny there is maybe because we are such a traumatized people, maybe that's why we have such good understanding. I think actually we do have a deeper understanding of trauma and ways to mitigate it than any other period, but well, okay, maybe now that I just said that out loud, there's a part of my brain going, but what about iboga?
What's iboga?
Ibogaine is a chemical found in the iboga tree that is actually worshipped in Africa. It's a psychedelic that has this unique 48-hour, I think, duration.
Fuck that.
Jesus.
And but the thing is, they have this whole ritual where you consume the iboga. They it's interesting. A lot of these they do this with ayahuasca too, in these tribal healing ceremonies. In the West, the sort of best practices for taking psychedelics, especially for healing or enlightenment purposes, is set and setting. You want things to be safe and calm and comfortable, but they put you in the iboga ceremony, part of it involves they bury you alive.
Damn.
And there's this symbolic, you go to the land of the dead and you talk to your ancestors, etc., and then you come back and but the thing is that
Like T'Challa in Black Panther.
exactly that actually was probably a direct reference for this, but
That's why I didn't feel bad making a Marvel shout out.
yeah, I guess there's I could suggest the episode of Hamilton's Pharmacopoeia that was about iboga. I'll link to that too. But it has really good people. The episode that I was just talking about was about the opioid epidemic. It cures addictions. It and it's one of those things that I struggle with. Scott Alexander also had the cultural evolution essay that I think we did an essay about, or did a podcast about the essay, where yeah, I think modern science does know a lot about trauma, but we're really bad at being able to take that knowledge and do anything useful with it. It seems actually we didn't really get that much into this, but in this article, in another stuff I've read, telling someone, oh shit, that thing happened and you're going to develop PTSD and now we need to put you through therapy immediately and have you process it ahead of time, actually seems to cause PTSD or crystallize it in ways that Jane McGonigal, I'm going to keep making references, but Jane McGonigal wrote Super Better and has a whole therapy system around that, but this is someone who opened a cabinet door in her kitchen, was bending down, stood up, smacked her head against the cabinet door, and gave herself brain trauma.
Ooh.
And was this very effective executive of some kind, or I don't know if it was an executive, but was a high functioning effective person before this, and then was struggling with just trying to figure out how to recover, and found video games to be really helpful, and created this system of recovery through video games, but brought up research about when when a traumatic event happens, something that could crystallize PTSD style trauma, they did a experimental intervention of just playing Tetris. And I read about other okay, now I'm gonna end up getting way too deep into more of this essay, so
But are you
maybe we
saying
should
that-
hang on to it for another time.
Are you saying that my playing a lot of Plants vs. Zombies to deal with stress is probably not a complete bad use of my time.
It's probably quite adaptive, actually.
Hell yes. Green light to waste my time playing phone games.
Or at least they've shown that, like, a tsunami wipes out your village, or there's some kind of horrible, poison event, war, etc. Like, if you give people that survived Tetris immediately afterward, it seems to prevent trauma from crystallizing in a way that, like, we don't quite understand, but it seems like ancient societies, or, like, older societies that, like, had these whole ritualistic traditions around this did.
Or so if they didn't understand it, they at least knew, like, kind of like the what do we call it?
They didn't. We have like the scientific understanding, the neurological like way that it happens is like sort of the thing that you're just saying, Inuyasha.
Yeah.
Where it's
So
like,
your argument,
we know a lot about it, but like we don't have we have the knowledge, we don't have the really like wisdom, if that makes any sense.
I guess you were saying that we know a lot about trauma, but nothing about how to deal with or fix trauma.
Yeah, because it seems to be pretty unintuitive. Like people's intuition was, a tsunami wipes out your village and you're one of the survivors in a refugee camp, and then like they send a therapist in there to talk to you about it.
Yeah.
But like
that made it worse.
Seems like that makes it worse. Whereas if you gave them Tetris, or if you did one of these, they I think mentioned that in this article, and I'm failing to.
Wouldn't you say that if like a society thinks they know trauma better than anyone else, but they have absolutely no way of coping with it or fixing it, then they don't actually know more about trauma than everyone else?
That sounds like just a definitions thing. Like, what I'm trying to say is I think we understand the neurological side of what causes trauma, how it forms, what that looks like throughout the rest of your life. But, like, when I say we lack the wisdom, it seems like really people figured out what worked through trial and error, and then sort of just passed that down cultural evolution-wise as, like, maybe they have, like, some kind of mythology around, well, this god fucked up in this way, and then because this happened, we have to do this. And it doesn't really map to reality, but, like, I don't know. I find this sort of thing fascinating, and I feel like it's also sort of, it's gonna be its own whole topic, probably.
But cultural evolution was the word I was looking for to bring that home. Like, the biblical wisdom of, like, don't eat pork or something. Like, it wasn't because pork is inherently, I'm making up an example, but it's not like pigs have devils, but it's because like you can get trichomania from eating pork, and you want to avoid that because Bronze Age people who don't know how to wash their hands or
no,
cook
actually
food
it turns
properly.
out genetically, or the Jewish people or the Israelites who lived in that area at the time were particularly susceptible to a disease, and I'm misremembering the details of this, but it's super interesting as an example of why Jews in particular had this taboo and other peoples around them didn't.
Yeah, no, totally. I guess what I'm getting at is that it's possible to be right by accident and have things that work to solve a problem that your community is dealing with, even if you don't like really know what you're doing.
We have always done it this way.
Right.
So I hate to say this, but isn't the traditional answer most cultures have to be like, don't be such a whiner? Because I don't think that's the best answer, but that's the one that most societies seem to have.
Unfortunately, it seems to work.
Okay.
But like,
well, I mean, if it works, then that's not unfortunate, right? I guess it's unfortunate for the few people that it doesn't work for.
Because I did grow up sort of being told, don't be such a whiner about like real mental disorders, but like, I think that's not actually what they're doing though. When in the, was it the Sri Lankan
tsunami
earthquake or tsunami that they brought up in this, we didn't even get into that, but it wasn't don't be a whiner. Like, that culture had taboos around talking about traumatic things and the need to use euphemisms to talk about it.
Yeah. Because
they had this belief that there were like evil spirits that could be of, I guess, like bad memories or something that could be conjured if you talk about it. But it seems like that helped people not develop trauma, where maybe you're not telling them you're bad if you're crying or like, you need to suck it up or whatever, but more of just sort of, no, we as a people don't think that it's helpful to talk about these things. Well, but like, it doesn't have to mean throwing somebody under the bus or saying that they're bad. If they're upset, just sort of like, giving them a pat on the back and saying, hey, like, I know it's hard, but we as a culture don't talk about these things.
Mental health is hard. Like you said, being human is hard. I'm looking forward to. I have no idea.
I'm looking forward to not being human.
Well, that too. Maybe that is actually the answer.
Transcending that whole state.
I was gonna say I'm looking forward to like the future where we have a way to know, a full brain scan that you can figure something out. Like, oh yeah, no, you have this problem, and this is actually the solution. But maybe easier than that would just be not being human anymore. So
neurofeedback's pretty good for that. I got to do some neurofeedback when I still had my employee-sponsored healthcare, and I was kind of upset that I had to stop. But they do sort of do a brain scan, and they showed me some of my shit. They're like, yep, these are the regions that are typically involved in ADD, and when we like showed you these videos or had you do these tests, these lit up real hard, and this is the intervention we're going to try to do to train you out of that. And then like there were various other things around anxiety, and even I was trying to do an experimental like delta, what was it?
Well, that sounds like a whole nother episode, though.
It probably is at least one more episode.
Okay, all right.
We're going to thank a patron, and the specific patron that we're going to thank is Simon. Yeah?
Yes.
Yes, it is.
High five, Simon.
Simon, thank you very much. You have helped make us feel like we're contributing to the community, and, you know, help us pay the bills around here because they're not zero, and we really appreciate the support.
Oh, and you didn't say this on the air, but the new power adapter for the mixer box, what is that thing?
Yeah, it's a mixer.
Anyway,
Simon,
it
you
works.
helped us buy the new thing.
Yay!
That makes the stuff sound better.
Which makes us let the people have the podcast.
Indeed.
Oh,
You
yeah,
have directly helped everyone listen to this podcast.
We didn't need that for the last one because we did that one remotely. That's right.
Right.
Yeah. It's been a long few weeks, people. So we haven't done it in person in I have no idea how long. But everyone stay safe and have fun out there. We can't go outside because yesterday apparently Denver had the worst air quality in the developed world. So
I went outside.
I was outside all day yesterday.
I was too.
Yeah.
It was stupid.
Yep.
Probably shouldn't have.
Well, I didn't learn till this morning that, oh, that's why. Yeah, my throat hurt immediately, and I could look directly at the sun.
I was
without
coughing all day
sunglasses.
yesterday, and I was like, oh my god, did I get COVID? I'm vaccinated, but maybe I got the COVID.
I was shocked that this smoke came from the East Coast. It's like well over 1,000 miles away, and the entire state is blanketed in a thick layer of smoke. I'm like,
West
There's
Coast,
disapprovingly at the
did I
East
say
Coast.
West Coast?
Wait, did you say east?
I meant West.
Okay,
You
yeah.
did say East.
I did say East.
I'm gonna glare disapprovingly at both coasts.
Yeah. If you're
Come
on
on,
one of the
coasts.
coasts, you really should
Stop
be
burning
in Denver
things.
if you're a rationalist.
Just get off the coast.
It's not like Colorado's never burned parts of our state before.
Move to the high ground. The coasts are going under anyway, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right. Clearly, we've been at this too long. So,
Cool. All right.
we'll be back in a couple weeks. We mentioned the Less Wrong post we'll talk about next week, so, or next episode. Thanks for hanging out, everybody. I don't know what else to say, so we're going to ramble until Inyash hits the end of the record button.
Okay.
So,
Bye,
I'll catch you
everybody.
later.
Bye.